Chapter 1470. Everyone, please stop for a moment and listen to me. Murong suddenly spoke just as the competition was getting intense. As a result, the crowd stopped fighting and turned to look at Murong. Murong was the real deal. No matter how they fought, if Murong did not agree, there was nothing they could do. There's only one saint weapon, but everyone is very enthusiastic. Who should I get to? Murong pretended to ponder. We, the unparalleled palace, are willing to exchange a Chaos Ancestor Saint for this supreme saint weapon. At the same time, we can promise you one thing within our power. The beautiful elder from the unparalleled palace was the first to speak. Hiss! Hearing the elder from the unparalleled palace, the surrounding people could not help but suck in a breath of cold air. The Chaos Ancestor Saint weapon was nothing. With the unparalleled palace's foundation, even if it was not much, it was definitely not little. Taking out one was just a drop in the ocean. However, agreeing to Murong's request was no small matter. Although it was something within their power, with the status of the unparalleled palace, what could they not agree to? Murong has struck gold. In an instant, countless people were envious and jealous of Murong, especially those craftsmen. They were so jealous that they were about to go crazy. This little bastard's luck is really good. Li Chun and the other two looked at Murong with ashen faces, their eyes shining with resentment. As the outer disciples of the true martial sacred hall, the three craftsmen had never enjoyed such treatment before. We, the Purple Thunder Hall, agreed to one thing and one Chaos Ancestor Saint weapon. An elder from the Purple Thunder Hall of the 10 Great Sacred Grounds also spoke. There was no hesitation. Hearing the offers from the 2 sacred grounds, other than the people from the other sacred grounds who had not given up, the other forces all stopped fighting. Because they knew that they had no chance. They could take out the Chaos Ancestor Saint weapon. However, agreeing to Murong's request was not as important as agreeing to the 9 Great Sacred Grounds. Even an idiot would know how to choose. Now, all Murong had to do was to choose from the other holy lands. Murong was indeed tempted. Murong, if you're willing to give this saint artifact to our true martial temple, our true martial temple can let you return to the sect and directly become the sect's holy son. You can enjoy any holy son's treatment. Moreover, our true martial temple can also teach you our temple's ultimate technique. The true martial scripture. The holy heavens elder, who had been silent for a long time, suddenly spoke to Murong. The Jinwu scripture. Hearing this, everyone turned pale with fright. The true martial scripture was the ultimate technique of the true martial temple. It was the cultivation technique that made the founder of the true martial temple famous. Its power was extremely terrifying. Moreover, in the true martial temple, only the temple master had the qualifications to inherit it. Today, the Holy Heavens Elder actually made an exception and taught Murong the Jinwu Holy Scripture. Could it be that he wanted to raise Murong as the Hall Master's successor? Everyone was shocked. In particular, the true martial temple's disciples were so shocked that their thoughts stopped moving. The true martial scripture was a cultivation technique that every true martial temple's disciple dreamed of. Everyone wanted to obtain it, and only a limited number of disciples were able to learn this peerless cultivation technique. However, Murong obtained it so easily. In an instant, the true martial temple's disciples became even more envious and jealous of Murong, especially Li Chun and the others, who were going crazy with jealousy. They couldn't wait to become Murong and agree to it. Murong was also shocked, but he quickly sneered. To others, the true martial scripture was definitely tempting. However, one couldn't forget that Murong had the chaotic celestial body. He could only cultivate the chaotic celestial body record and couldn't cultivate other cultivation techniques. They could only cultivate cultivation techniques that were related to battle techniques. The true martial scripture was useless to him. Of course, Murong couldn't use it, but others could. However, the true martial temple strictly prohibited this cultivation technique from being taught to outsiders. Most importantly, Murongyu didn't think that the true martial temple would really treat him as a saint and teach him the true martial scripture. After all, he had already betrayed the true martial temple. Could it be that the true martial temple would really accept him as a disciple and nurture him as a saint? The true martial temple still had a warrant for Murongyu. Wouldn't that be slapping themselves in the face? It was very likely that they would ignore Murongyu after obtaining the Peerless Saint artifact. Therefore, Murongyu eliminated the true martial temple from the first place. They were still chasing after him. Would he give them a saint artifact for them to study? Only an idiot would do that. Hee. I'm just a traitor of the true martial temple. Murongyu only smiled faintly. After hearing Murongyu's words, the elders of the Unparalleled Palace and Purple Thunder Hall couldn't help but relax. Although Murongyu didn't say anything, his words contained many meanings. He directly rejected the true martial temple. Murongyu, regarding the previous matter, the true martial temple was indeed in the wrong first. If you agree to our conditions, we will immediately deal with those people. Although the Holy Heaven's elder didn't like Murongyu, he still couldn't help but persuade him. Hearing that, Li Chun and the others couldn't help but tremble. After being in the true martial temple for so long, they had a slight understanding of the true martial temple. They all knew that if Murongyu really agreed, the three of them would definitely die. After all, the three of them together weren't worth as much as Murongyu alone. For a moment, the three of them had ugly expressions. Murongyu shook his head. I'm sorry, I'm now a disciple of the Unparalleled Palace. It's pretty good in the Unparalleled Palace. Although I'm very monstrous, my senior brothers have never suppressed me. Can the true martial temple do that? When he reached the end of his sentence, Murongyu's face was filled with ridicule. Suppression, except for the Unparalleled Palace, was a phenomenon that existed in all the other holy grounds. The reason why the Unparalleled Palace didn't have that many disciples was probably because there weren't many of them. The Holy Heaven's elder's face was slightly red. After snorting coldly, he flicked his sleeves and left. Murongyu had already rejected them thoroughly. He didn't want to be rude to stay here. 2 primal chaos ancestral artifacts, and promise me one thing. Murongyu's gaze swept across the faces of the elders of the 8 holy grounds and finally fixed on the beautiful elder of the Unparalleled Palace. The elders of the Purple Thunder Hall and the Piercing Cloud Island fell silent. Although they were elders, they didn't have the right to decide. Murongyu's condition was a little too much for them. All right, I agree. However, the beautiful elder of the Unparalleled Palace didn't hesitate and immediately agreed. However, our Unparalleled Palace doesn't have any extra primal chaos ancestral artifacts right now. The transaction will take a few days. The beautiful elder of the Unparalleled Palace added. Deal. Murongyu immediately agreed. This is my communication jade slip. When the Unparalleled Palace's primal chaos ancestral artifacts are delivered, I'll inform you of the transaction. The beautiful elder handed a communication jade slip to Murongyu and floated away. Murongyu, if you refine an ultimate formation saint artifact in the future, please contact us. The elder of the Purple Thunder Hall handed a communication jade slip to Murongyu and left alone. Then, one by one, they handed their communication jade slips to Murongyu and left one after another. They weren't as forthright as the Unparalleled Palace, but they weren't satisfied. Murongyu kept all their communication jade slips into the Hichu Luo Shu. If used well, these communication jade slips could not only be used to send messages, they could also be used for many other things. As for refining saint artifacts, Murongyu would still refine saint artifacts in the future, but for his own people. As for selling them, there was a saying, a rare commodity worth hoarding. If there were too many of these saint artifacts, they wouldn't be worth much. Little junior brother, not only did you steal the limelight this time, you also gain a lot. When Murongyu returned, Wu Xinshui couldn't help but say enviously. Murongyu just shook his head and smiled. 2 primal chaos ancestral artifacts were indeed a lot for him now. However, when he reached the Saint King realm, he would need to refine the primal chaos ancestral artifacts to continue increasing his strength. At that time, not to mention 2 primal chaos ancestral artifacts, even 200 primal chaos ancestral artifacts wouldn't be enough. Murong Yu was just preparing for a rainy day. Little junior brother, I heard that you also refined some saint artifacts that reach the limit of formation in the true martial temple. Yu Yangjia said with a frown. Murong Yu laughed. 4th senior brother, do you think that if the true martial temple had those saint artifacts, they would still want to buy this peerless saint artifact of mine? Lu Xiankai suddenly smiled. Little junior brother, did you do something to those saint artifacts? Murong Yu nodded. It was inevitable that he would do something to them. Those saint artifacts that reached the limit of formation weren't roadside goods. Murong Yu had only set up another formation in that saint artifact. On that day, that formation wasn't activated. However, on the second day, that formation would automatically activate. Once that formation was activated, it would fuse perfectly with the other formations. At that time, as long as someone wanted to study the arrangement and combination of those formations, the power of that formation would explode and quickly destroy all the other formations. However, before it was activated, it wouldn't affect that saint artifact at all. Murong Yu even felt that the formations of a few saint artifacts had already been destroyed. Little junior brother, you're too sinister. This peerless saint artifact wouldn't have set up such a formation, right? Wu Xinshui chuckled and looked at Murong Yu. Murong Yu hurriedly shook his head. If that was really the case, he would have offended the unparalleled palace. Moreover, Murong Yu had always been very fair when it came to transactions. Let's go back first. After the weapon crafting conference ended, the alchemy conference continued half a month later. Murong Yu had performed exceptionally this time. He also wanted to go back earlier to carefully experience this experience and prepare for the alchemy conference. Chapter 1471. Generally, profound sages could only refine superb saint weapons. Very few people could refine superb saint weapons. Of course, this was because of their own strength. It should be known that the more powerful a saint weapon was, the more difficult it was to refine. Carving an array formation inside also required an even greater amount of energy and mental power. However, this was not the main reason. The main reason was that there seemed to be the rules of heaven and earth inside. Otherwise, with Murong Yu's current strength, which was comparable to a first-level holy king, even if he could not refine a saint weapon, refining a superb saint weapon would not be a problem at all. However, all the weapon refiners in the holy world, including Murong Yu, could basically refine saint weapons that surpassed their own level. For someone like Murong Yu, who had suddenly refined a superb saint weapon, it was definitely just luck. Indeed, Murong Yu had only refined a superb saint weapon out of luck. Originally, he had only intended to refine a superb saint weapon. With his ability to refine weapons, he could basically refine a superb saint weapon in a day. Moreover, it was the kind that had reached the limit of formations. However, Murong Yu naturally would not be so stupid as to refine a saint weapon in a day in front of everyone. Wasn't this clearly asking others to kill him? As the saying went, the tallest tree in the forest would be destroyed by the wind. Originally, Murong Yu had planned to refine the saint weapon successfully in 6 or 7 days. Therefore, he had slowed down. However, when the time was up, he felt that this saint weapon was unprecedentedly powerful when it was taking shape, because he had used the materials used to refine superb saint weapons to refine superb saint weapons. At that time, Murong Yu felt that this saint weapon might surpass the level of superb saint weapon. Therefore, he tried to carve more formations into it with the intention of giving it a try. This saint weapon was so powerful that it could completely withstand and accommodate 49,999 formations. Therefore, after Murong Yu had carved 19,999 formations, he did not stop. Instead, he continued to carve formations. As expected, this saint weapon easily withstood this formation. Therefore, Murong Yu continued to add formations and finally refined a superb saint weapon that had reached the limit of formations. There were many important factors that contributed to the successful forging of a supreme grade saint artifact. The first reason was that the materials needed to refine Saint artifacts were relatively powerful. The other and most important reason was Murong Yu's powerful refining ability. If it had been someone else, they wouldn't have had the confidence to take 6 or 7 days to form a sacred artifact, even if they felt that this sacred artifact could become a higher-grade sacred artifact. They weren't confident that they could carve more high-level formations. Moreover, what if he failed halfway through? Where would he find the time to refine another Saint artifact? Wouldn't that mean that he had lost? As a result, they would choose to push the formations of supreme quality Saint artifacts to the limit and not forge supreme quality Saint artifacts like Murong Yu. Because Murong Yu had nothing to fear. He still had a lot of materials in his storage ring. Even if he failed this time, he could just refine another Saint artifact. How much time could it take? These materials are just right for us to work together. After returning to the mountain where they were temporarily staying, Murong Yu entered the Hichu Luoshu world. Then, he took out the storage ring that True Martial Temple had given him. These storage rings weren't returned after refining the weapons, so there were a lot of materials in them. It could be seen how wealthy True Martial Temple was. Still can't do it? After a long time, Murong Yu stopped. Just now, he had used a lot of materials for supreme quality Saint artifacts to refine weapons. However, he could only refine supreme quality Saint artifacts every time. He couldn't refine supreme quality Saint artifacts at all. His current state was the same as that day. In fact, his refining speed was even slower. Was it really just luck that day? Murong Yu's face darkened, and he continued to refine weapons. While Murong Yu was hiding to refine weapons, many guests came to the mountain where they were temporarily staying. After Murong Yu was in the limelight at the weapon refining convention, his reputation spread far and wide. These people had all come because of Murong Yu's reputation. Although they couldn't rope in Murong Yu, it would be beneficial for them if they could form a relationship with such a promising artificer. Therefore, they ignored the arrest warrant for Murong Yu from True Martial Temple. Therefore, many people came to visit Murong Yu. However, Murong Yu was in the Hichu Luoshu world and didn't pay attention to them at all. Only Wu Xinshui and the other two came out. In fact, Yu Yangjia and Lu Xiankai didn't usually show up. It was only Wu Xinshui who received these people. For 10 consecutive days, the crowd seemed to be endless. It made Wu Xinshui want to set up a restriction on the mountain to prevent people from coming in. However, the three of them didn't do that. Instead, they received the crowd very politely. This was because they knew about Murong Yu's situation. Although Murong Yu was a disciple of the infernal sect, there were too few of them. Sometimes, they might not be able to help Murong Yu. Distant water couldn't put out a nearby fire. However, these people were different. They were everywhere in the human race. When going out, they had to rely on their friends. Who knew when Murong Yu would need them? Bang! A war blade in front of Murong Yu's eyes suddenly exploded. This was because he had forcefully added the 20,000th formation to the saber. Is it really just luck that I'm unable to successfully refine a peerless Saint artifact? Murong Yu sighed and stopped refining. This was because he had no more materials. However, although he didn't successfully refine a sacred weapon these days, he had gained a lot of insight. Now his refining speed was faster and more skillful. The sacred weapon he refined was stronger and closer to his sacred weapon. Next, I'll refine pills. Time flowed like water, and half a month passed in the blink of an eye. On this day, Murong Yu stepped out of the Hichu Luoshu world. When he scanned with his spirit consciousness, he happened to see Wu Xinshui smiling as he released a group of people. 17th Senior Brother, what's going on? Why are there so many people these days? Murong Yu walked over and asked curiously. Although he was in the Hichu Luoshu world, he still left a trace of spirit consciousness outside. However, he didn't want to bother about it. Therefore, although he knew that many people had been here these days, he didn't know what was going on. Wu Xinshui only rolled his eyes at Murong Yu. Without saying anything, he tossed something over. Murong Yu caught it and saw that it was a storage ring. While he was puzzled, he had already probed it with his spirit consciousness. What's going on? Are these all communication jade slips? With a single glance, Murong Yu jumped in fright. There was only one thing in the storage rings. A mountain of communication jade slips. 17th Senior Brother, did you rob many people in the past half a month? Did you specifically rob them of their teleportation jade slips? Murong Yu still couldn't guess what was going on. However, he still joked with Wu Xinshui. Wu Xinshui glared at Murong Yu. In the past half a month, he didn't rest or sleep. Whether it was day or night, he received group after group of people who came to visit Murong Yu. If it wasn't for the alchemy conference starting soon, there would be an endless stream of people. They're all for you. Every one of them said that you need them, so you have to ask. Moreover, these communication jade slips can sense the existence of their original bodies within a certain range. Murong Yu nodded and threw the storage ring full of communication jade slips into the Hichu Luoshu world. 17th Senior Brother, you've worked hard. When the day comes when I can refine a supreme weapon, I will refine a powerful supreme weapon for you to repay you. Forget it. Wu Xinshui rolled his eyes. No matter how a supreme weapon was refined, it still needed the nourishment of a supreme weapon to become a powerful supreme weapon. Even if I can't refine it, I'll find you a supreme weapon. Murong Yu laughed. He already had a few supreme weapons in his hands. However, he couldn't give them to Wu Xinshui and the others now. At the same time, Yu Yangjia and Lu Xiankai also came out. Thus, the four of them flew towards the square. Just as the two of them flew away from the mountain peak, Murong Yu couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. Not far in front of him, a beautiful woman with a cold expression stood facing the wind. After seeing Murong Yu, a smile appeared on her face. Like a flower in full bloom, Murong Yu and the others couldn't help but be startled. This beautiful woman was the unparalleled palace's elder Xuanning. Like her name, she was famous for being cold and indifferent. She never gave anyone a good face. Moreover, it seemed that she cultivated an ice cultivation technique. Anyone within a certain distance from her would feel cold. Therefore, even her disciples were unwilling to stay close to her. Therefore, when Murong Yu and the others saw Elder Xuanning smiling, they were stunned. Especially Yu Yangjia and the others who knew Elder Xuanning better. They were even more shocked than Murong Yu. Don't tell me this old woman has taken a liking to Junior Brother. Yu Yangjia and the others looked at each other and saw the meaning in each other's eyes. Junior Brother is so outstanding. Although this woman is the unparalleled palace's elder, she's about 25 years old. She's extremely beautiful. Whether it's her status or appearance, she's worthy of Junior Brother. Lu Xiankai and the others thought to themselves. Immediately, the three of them slowed down their footsteps. Only Murong Yu, who didn't know anything, went up to greet her. Elder Xuanning, you actually came personally. Could it be that you've brought my 2 primal chaos ancestral artifacts? Hearing Murong Yu's words, Yu Yangjia and the others couldn't help but roll their eyes. According to them, Murong Yu should have praised Elder Xuanning's beauty. If he married Elder Xuanning, then no matter how big the holy world was, who would dare to touch him? Elder Xuanning didn't say anything. She only nodded slightly and handed a storage ring to Murong Yu. Here are the 2 chaos ancestral weapons. Murong Yu took the storage ring and put it into his Hichu Luoshu without even looking at it. At the same time, he threw the supreme grade saint weapon he refined half a month ago to Elder Xuanning. Elder Xuanning was a little surprised. Aren't you going to check it? Murong Yu shook his head. I trust you, Elder Xuanning. A strange look flashed in Elder Xuanning's eyes. After taking a deep look at Murong Yu, she turned and left without saying anything. Chapter 1472. In the square, just like the beginning of the artifact refining convention, there were people everywhere. Except for the central position, the other places were full of people. Before the artifact refining convention began, when Murong Yu entered the square, when facing him, they all looked at him with anger, disdain, and so on. No one gave him a good face. But today, before Murong Yu stepped into the square, one by one, eyes full of goodwill greeted him. Some even directly nodded to Murong Yu. This treatment was really the difference between heaven and earth. Of course, there was also disdain, anger, and so on. But relatively speaking, those were almost negligible. The reason for this situation was that Murong Yu's status had become higher. Previously, he was a spy's disciple, but the people present were all disciples of some big forces. Although they were a little afraid of the spy's disciples, it was far from the point of being afraid of them. But when Murong Yu showed his talent in artifact refining, his status rose, even surpassing his status in the spy's organization in one fell swoop. The people present didn't have to make friends with the spy's disciples, and even disdain them. But they could not make friends with someone with a super talent in artifact refining. What if this person became a weapon saint in the future? In that case, he would have countless followers, and hundreds would respond to his call. Regardless of who they were, if they wanted to make a move on Murong Yu, they would have to consider his suitors. Moreover, everyone wanted a saint tool, and maybe there would be a time when they would ask Murong Yu for it. Murong Yu also responded with a smile on his face. When he walked to the spy's seat, the expression on his face was a little stiff. Little junior brother, we also benefited from your light. Those people's eyes also became a lot gentler. Wu Xinshui said with a smile. Murong Yu couldn't help but smile bitterly. The others didn't have any malice towards the spy's disciples. At most, the people of the 10 Holy Lands were dissatisfied with the spy's position as the #1 Holy Land. The most important thing was that the disciples of the true martial temple didn't like the spy's disciples, because the spy's organization had always been above the true martial temple. Moreover, at the very beginning, Murong Yu had suppressed the ancient sage of the Spaceless Tao, causing the true martial sacred hall to lose face. The most important thing was that the infernal branch had recruited Murong Yu, a traitor of the true martial temple. However, many disciples of the true martial temple were still unhappy with them. Little bastard, you've been quite proud of yourself these past few days. However, in the holy world, the status of an alchemist was much higher than that of an artificer. Just as Murong Yu sat down, a voice filled with hatred resounded in his ears. I'll make sure your reputation goes down the drain. Murong Yu frowned slightly, and a cold, killing intent flashed in the depths of his eyes. There were too many people here, so he couldn't figure out who had sent him the message. Therefore, he only snorted coldly. He was determined to become the champion of the alchemy conference. As long as he became the champion, he could suppress everything. Very quickly, the Holy Heaven's Elder appeared once more. Just like the weapon crafting convention, the alchemy convention doesn't have many rules. It was a competition of alchemy compatibility. The one with the highest compatibility would be the champion of the alchemy convention. Under the same compatibility, the one with the highest grade of alchemy would be the winner. The Holy Heaven's Elder spoke concisely, and with just a few sentences, everyone went up to the stage. Swish! When Murong Yu stood up from his seat and walked towards the center of the plaza, countless gazes swept across the void and landed on Murong Yu. Murong Yu is indeed a genius in both alchemy and smithing. His smithing ability is so heaven-defying, I wonder how his alchemy ability is. There are many people in the holy world who specialize in both smithing and alchemy. However, no one has achieved great success. Those who have great achievements only specialize in one aspect. They either smithing or alchemy. Murong Yu is so talented in smithing, but his alchemy ability shouldn't be that great, right? Maybe he just went out to play? Someone guessed. That's where you're wrong. It's said that when Murong Yu was still a servant disciple in the true martial sacred hall, he could already refine pills with a compatibility of more than 90%. He's a true alchemy grandmaster. That's impossible, right? How can Murong Yu be so heaven-defying? It must be a rumor. Some people questioned in disbelief. It's up to you to believe it or not. In any case, the results will be out soon. As everyone discussed, Murong Yu's alchemy achievements in the true martial sacred hall were dug up. Hence, more and more people's gazes gathered on Murong Yu. Some people who didn't pay a visit to Murong Yu were secretly regretting it in their hearts. They had already made up their minds to pay a visit to Murong Yu after the alchemy convention. Just like the convention, Murong Yu and the rest of the participants received a storage ring that was filled with all kinds of alchemy ingredients. However, it was different from smithing, as any of the ingredients could be used to refine a sane artifact. However, alchemy required a pill formula. Without a pill formula, no matter how many ingredients one had, one wouldn't be able to refine a pill. After Murong Yu probed the storage ring with his spiritual force, he realized that there were many different kinds of ingredients in the storage ring. However, they were all mixed together, and there was no pill formula. I believe that everyone can see that there are all kinds of ingredients in the storage ring, and there is no pill formula. Very good. As an alchemist, not only do you have to be proficient in alchemy, but you also have to have a strong ability to identify the ingredients and have countless pill formulas. What you have to do now is not only to refine the pill with the highest compatibility, but also to choose the ingredients that you need to refine the pill from the tens of thousands of ingredients in the storage ring. Then, let's start now. The Holy Heavens Elder said faintly and left the square in a flash. At the same time, Murong Yu and the rest of the participants entered the independent space again. Murong Yu and the rest of the participants began to identify the ingredients. Isn't it too difficult to identify the medicinal properties of tens of thousands of ingredients and choose the ingredients that you need to refine the pill? Not to mention half a month, I wouldn't be able to identify them even if I had to do it for 15 years. Outside the square, the sages were all shocked. Of course you can't do it because you don't even recognize those ingredients and you don't have any pill formulas in your head. Someone sneered. For those alchemists who are immersed in the field of alchemy, identifying medicinal herbs is only the most basic ability. However, there should be many people trying to take advantage of the situation. Let's just watch. I quit. Indeed, it didn't take long for those who failed to refine the pill to leave unwillingly. They might be alchemists, but their ability to identify the ingredients was too weak. In the face of tens of thousands of ingredients, they couldn't identify the ingredients at all. Moreover, they had too few pill formulas, and they didn't know what pill they needed to refine. Even if they wanted to refine a pill, they couldn't find the ingredients. Although there were tens of thousands of ingredients in the storage ring, there might not be the ingredients that they needed to refine the pill that they wanted to refine. As the days passed, more and more people chose to leave the alchemy conference. Those who stayed were more or less confident, or they were unwilling to give up just like that. Murong Yu was also trying his best to identify the ingredients at this time. In reality, although Murong Yu was extremely talented in alchemy, his foundation was too weak. After all, he hadn't ascended to the holy world for long, and most of his time was spent cultivating and increasing his strength. He basically didn't have much contact with the ingredients. Therefore, he was rather embarrassed now. Even though a few days had passed, he only identified a few hundred types of pills. These few hundred types of medicinal ingredients were just the tip of the iceberg compared to tens of thousands of medicinal ingredients. Most of them were Murong Yu, and he had never even heard of them. Moreover, the pill formulas in Murong Yu's head were pitifully few. Among the hundreds of medicinal ingredients that he identified, none of them were suitable for the pill formulas that he knew. This made him very embarrassed. I need to find time to cram some knowledge in this area in the future, and I also need to cram some knowledge in refining. Murong Yu thought to himself as he identified the medicinal ingredients. If it wasn't for the fact that he had something to rely on in his heart, he would have left with his tail between his legs like the others. That would be a huge loss of face. At this time, half a month's time had passed. Some of the alchemists who were still in the square were already refining pills. On the other hand, some people were still trying to identify the pills. Perhaps they were trying to find the medicinal ingredients needed to concoct higher-grade pills. Of course, there were still many people like Murong Yu who only identified a few hundred types of medicinal ingredients, but didn't want to give up just like that. In the blink of an eye, 10 days had passed. There were only 5 days left until the end. There were still many people in the square who hadn't started refining pills, including Murong Yu. It's over. Don't tell me little junior brother hasn't found the ingredients he needs? Wu Xinshui said to Lu Xiankai and Yu Yangjia speechlessly. Maybe it's true, but it shouldn't be. Isn't his alchemy ability quite heaven-defying? Lu Xinkai's voice was a little low. Strong alchemy ability doesn't necessarily mean the ability to identify medicinal ingredients is strong. Don't forget, little junior brother hasn't been in the holy world for long, so it's normal that he doesn't recognize those medicinal ingredients and doesn't have many pill formulas. Yu Yangjia said indifferently. Lu Xiankai and Wu Xinshui looked at each other. Little junior brother can't be like what fourth senior brother said, right? If that's the case, then he's really a tragedy. True martial temple is too shameless. Didn't they give out the corresponding pill formulas and medicinal ingredients in the previous years? Only this way can we test who's better and stronger. Moreover, little junior brother isn't anxious. Why are you guys so anxious? The emperor is not anxious, but the eunuchs are. Yu Yangjia shook his head and said helplessly to Lu Xiankai and Wu Xinshui. Chapter 1473. Rumble. While Lu Xiankai and the others were talking, a muffled sound suddenly came from the square. Everyone immediately looked over and saw a ray of holy light rising from the sky. At the same time, it was accompanied by a rich pill fragrance. Someone has refined a pill. Everyone's eyes lit up as they looked over. They saw that one of the alchemists in the square had already stood up, and in his hand was a round pill the size of a longan. The incomparably rich medicinal fragrance was being emitted from the medicinal pills here. In fact, the pill was even emitting a faint light. That's a pill halo. A pill halo will only appear when it reaches at least 90% compatibility. A sage exclaimed. Hearing this, the sage who had successfully refined the pill revealed a trace of satisfaction on his face. Then, he quickly left the place and came to the side to hand the pill over to Elder Holy Heaven. Elder Holy Heaven was very powerful and was at the level of a primal chaos ancestor sage. Even if he wasn't an alchemist, there was no problem in inspecting the pill's compatibility. Therefore, he didn't even need a few breaths of time to announce, Zhao Hu Ultimate Origin Pill, 90% compatibility. Zhao Hu is the name of the alchemist, and the Ultimate Origin Pill was the name of the pill that he had successfully refined. However, the Ultimate Origin Pill could only be considered a low-level sage pill. However, Zhao Hu was the first alchemist to successfully refine a pill with a 90% compatibility. His alchemy ability was quite strong. Of course, there was no lack of luck involved. However, in the holy world, luck was also part of one's strength. If one was unlucky, they would fall to their death when they went out. Rumble. Just as Elder Holy Heaven announced, the second alchemist had also successfully refined a pill. The same 90% compatibility, and the grade of the pill was about the same. However, he was a little behind the first alchemist. Strictly speaking, he had already lost. In the following period of time, more alchemists continued to refine their pills. The alchemists who could persist until now were relatively strong. Therefore, the compatibility of their pills was no less than 80%. However, there were still not many alchemists with more than 90% compatibility, even if it was only a low-level sage pill. After all, a pill with a 90% compatibility was already considered an alchemy grandmaster. One had to know that there were very few alchemy grandmasters in the holy world. Of course, it didn't mean that one could become an alchemist just by refining a pill with a 90% compatibility. One could only be considered an alchemy grandmaster if the success rate of refining pills with 90% compatibility was above 60%. On the 11th day, on the 12th day, the 13th day, many people either succeeded or failed and left the square one after another. And now, those who were still in the square were some real alchemy experts. The pills they refined were relatively high grade, so the time it took to form the pills was relatively longer. Other than that, there were still some people who had yet to start concocting pills. There were dozens of people, and Murongyu was one of them. And these dozens of people were the targets of ridicule. It was obvious that these people had not found the medicinal herbs that could be used to refine pills. There's still 2 days left. If it were me, I would have come down long ago. Wouldn't it be embarrassing to stay here? Someone sneered disdainfully. Didn't they say that Murong Yu's alchemy skills are heaven-defying? Why haven't you started refining pills yet? It's obvious that he didn't find any medicinal herbs at all. Maybe he only prepared to refine pills on the last day, just like when he was refining, shocking the world with a single brilliant feat. Listening to the discussions of the crowd, Murong Yu remained calm, regardless of whether he heard them or not. But Lucien Kai and the others from the Infernal Branch were somewhat uneasy. It's over. Little junior brother is going to have a tragedy. He can't be unable to refine even one pill, right? That would be too embarrassing. As long as he could refine a pill, no matter what grade of pill it was, it wouldn't be too embarrassing. After all, he had already refined a pill. But if he didn't refine any pills in half a month, then it would be a real tragedy. Originally, Yu Yangzhao was still relatively calm, but now he was somewhat uneasy. There were still 2 days left. Could Murong Yu still be able to defy the heavens? Then what was Murong Yu's situation now? After more than 10 days of identifying medicinal herbs, Murong Yu still only identified a few hundred types of medicinal herbs, not even 900. And there were no medicinal herbs suitable for him to refine pills at all. Forget it. I'd better not try to be brave. Murong Yu helplessly gave up on identifying medicinal herbs. If this continued, he would really lose a lot of face this time. Hichu, it looks like you still have to do it. Murong Yu communicated with Hichu in his mind. Hichu couldn't even be bothered to look down on Murong Yu. He directly sent out a trace of his divine will, merging it with Murong Yu's, and entering the storage ring. Once his divine will covered the medicinal herbs, the names of these herbs automatically appeared in Murong Yu's mind. Their medicinal properties, and even what kind of pills they could be used to refine. In an instant, countless pieces of information appeared in his mind. This was because Hichu shared his memories with him. 3 Revolutions Soul Condensing Pill. It didn't take long for Hichu to confirm the pill they were going to refine. At the same time, the various medicinal herbs to refine, the 3 Revolutions Soul Condensing Pill automatically flew out. In total, there were more than 1,000 medicinal herbs. This is a pill that can repair the soul. As long as the soul isn't completely destroyed, it can be repaired. It's a kind of top divine pill. However, this pill formula has long been lost in the holy world, so there aren't many 3 Revolutions soul condensing pills circulating in the holy world. I didn't expect that there would be medicinal herbs to refine the 3 Revolutions soul condensing pill among these herbs. It'll let you amaze the world with a single brilliant feat. Hichu directly passed the pill formula and refining method to Murong Yu and said at the same time, "Big brother, I'm the one refining the pill. How can I refine such a high-grade divine pill with my current strength?" Murong Yu discovered that the 3 Revolutions soul condensing pill was effective even for primal chaos ancestor sages, so he was speechless. Although this divine pill is high-grade, and even a top-grade pill, however, there are no requirements to refine it. Even an alchemy grandmaster can refine it. Of course, the stronger one's alchemy ability, the stronger the effect of the 3 Revolutions soul condensing pill. Ordinary alchemy grandmasters are already very strong if they can refine it successfully. If it's a pill with a 90% compatibility, ordinary alchemy grandmasters can't do it. However, if it's a success, it'll definitely amaze the world. Hichu continued, "Although I'm a little stronger than ordinary alchemy grandmasters, I'm not that much stronger." Murong Yu was speechless. Just as he was about to choose another pill that he was confident in refining, he was interrupted by Hichu. "But you're different. With your alchemy ability, you can reach a compatibility of more than 93% with just some practice. You might even reach a compatibility of 95%, because you're not only an alchemy grandmaster, but also a soul sage. A soul sage alchemy grandmaster is the most suitable person to refine this pill." As he spoke, a wave of information poured into Murong Yu's mind. Therefore, Murong Yu knew that refining this pill required the addition of soul power. Alchemy grandmasters who weren't soul sages couldn't add soul power when refining this pill. So even if the pill was refined, the compatibility wouldn't be high, even less than 30%. This naturally didn't have any effect. Murong pondered for a moment and decided to refine this pill. However, he didn't immediately start. Instead, he deduced it in his mind. At this time, it was already the 14th day. Except for Murong, those who still couldn't find the herbs had already left the square. The rest of the people who stayed in the square were refining pills. Therefore, Murong's existence was particularly conspicuous. Murong is going to be a tragedy. He'll definitely lose face. Everyone, including Lu Xiankai and the others from the Infernal Branch, felt that Murong was going to lose face this time. But, hey, Murong is preparing to refine pills? Suddenly, someone noticed that Murong was moving because a variety of different herbs kept appearing in front of him out of thin air. In the blink of an eye, thousands of herbs appeared in front of everyone. What is he going to do? Everyone was puzzled. But soon, Murong gave him an answer. Streaks of flame of primal chaos kept appearing, wrapped around each herb, and then directly smelted it. Madman, madman, he actually wants to smelt thousands of herbs at once? This is simply crazy. Seeing Murong's actions, everyone present exclaimed. Then, one by one, they felt that Murong was really crazy. Whether it was refining weapons or refining pills, the step of smelting was necessary and also the most important. Every kind of material was different, and the fire required was also different. Generally speaking, weapon refiners and alchemists would only refine one kind of material at a time. Even if someone could refine several kinds of materials at the same time, they would only refine one kind for safety reasons. Therefore, in weapon refiners and alchemists, no one would refine many kinds of materials at the same time. And now, Murong couldn't refine more than one kind, but thousands of kinds. His mental strength and mental strength are actually so strong. He can refine thousands of kinds of materials at the same time. Everyone felt that they were going crazy. They all felt that it was too unbelievable. While they were still in shock, Murong had already started to refine the herbs in an orderly manner. Under his exquisite control, over 1,000 types of medicinal herbs were continuously smelted without any mistakes. This guy's mental strength are too terrifying. Even a holy king or an ancestral sage can't possibly have this ability. This saves a lot of time. But if his mental strength are exhausted, he will definitely suffer a tragedy. Someone sneered, thinking that Murong was just playing to the gallery. They all believed that it wouldn't be long before Murong's mental strength was exhausted. However, what they didn't know was that Murong was a soul sage, and his soul pool was much stronger than other soul sages of the same level. In a situation like this, he didn't need to consume much energy at all. Chapter 1474. The soul pool in Murong's soul space shook violently. Streams of soul power surged out like a torrent, turning into streams of mind power that quickly replenished the mind power that Murong had consumed. With such a large soul pool to replenish his soul power, Murong didn't consume any soul power at all. Not to mention melting thousands of herbs at the same time, even thousands or tens of thousands of herbs wouldn't be a problem. However, Murong was already in the limelight. If he continued like this, it would only be detrimental to him, not beneficial at all. However, in the eyes of outsiders, Murong's actions were just sensationalism. In fact, Murong didn't want to be so flashy. After all, if he was too flashy, he would attract the jealousy of many people. However, Murong was also forced to do so. There were only 2 days left. If he were to smell herbs one by one like the others, not to mention 2 days, even 20 days wouldn't be enough. Since that was the case, he would go crazy. As he separated the mind power, Murong was still thinking about the refining method of the 3 Revolutions soul condensing pill. Huiyang, great supplement pill, a bottle of 10 pills, all of which have a compatibility of 94%. Just as everyone's attention was on Murong suddenly spoke up. The holy heavens elder's loud and clear voice suddenly rang out. Wow! Immediately, the entire square and even the people further away were shocked. For a moment, everyone's eyes were on the square, looking at the arrogant Huiyang. At this moment, Huiyang was standing in front of the holy heaven's elder with an arrogant smile on his face. What a powerful alchemy ability! Everyone was not stingy with their praises. At this point in the alchemy conference, countless people had refined pills. Among them, there was no lack of pills with a compatibility of 94%. But before the blazing sun, each person could only refine one pill. A pill with a compatibility of 94% showed that this person was undoubtedly a very powerful alchemist. However, no matter how powerful he was, he couldn't compare to Huiyang. The difference between one pill and 10 pills was like the difference between heaven and earth. Therefore, when the holy heaven's elder announced Huiyang's results, the faces of the alchemists who had a compatibility of 94% darkened. From this moment on, Huiyang had trampled all of them under his feet. Unless someone else refined more pills with a compatibility of 94% or 95%, Huiyang would win. Otherwise, the champion of this competition would be Huiyang's. However, refining pills with a compatibility of 95% was easier said than done. Alchemy Saint. It should be known that even primal chaos ancestral saint-level alchemists would be participating in the Grand Alchemy Conference. Alchemy skills didn't saint alchemy skills of alchemy. It was precisely because of this that the alchemists of the true martial temple's inner hall could only refine pills with a 94% compatibility at most. Moreover, there were only a few people who could achieve this result. Pill saints were not allowed to participate in this alchemy assembly. Otherwise, it would be considered as bullying. The World's Fair. Huiyang, who felt the gazes of countless people on him, felt extremely satisfied. 10 pills in a bottle had reached a compatibility of 94%. This was something that would never appear in the entire true martial temple. Even those pill saints did not have such a result before they became pill saints. He knew that he would be the champion this time. Moreover, what awaited him was not only the champion of the alchemy conference, but also the keen nurturing of the true martial temple. He had the potential to become a pill saint. He immediately glanced at Murongyu, who was still refining pills with disdain. Then, he calmly left the square. Junior brother Huiyang, you will be the champion this time. Huiyang had just left the square when a few people surrounded him. The person who spoke was one of the 6 giants of the true martial temple's outer hall, the weapon refining Grandmaster Li Chun. These 3 fellows were completely defeated by Murongyu at the crafting convention, so they were all very worried. Now that they saw Huiyang's divine might, they naturally glowed brightly. Huiyang smiled faintly. I was just lucky. Murongyu, that trash, may be very strong in weapon refining, but in terms of alchemy, he's not even worthy of carrying my shoes. Li Chun and the other 2 couldn't help but blush. Before, they had proudly said that they would suppress Murongyu in weapon refining. But now, fortunately, Huiyang was still able to suppress Murongyu. Otherwise, the 6 of them would definitely suffer a tragedy. That little bastard is still holding on, but he doesn't know that in the end, he's just a joke for everyone. Wen Lin glanced sideways at Murongyu and said indifferently. His words were full of disdain. Huiyang just shook his head and did not continue to speak. However, the disdain on his face was very strong. After Huiyang, one alchemist after another succeeded in refining pills and left the square. However, no one's result could compare to Huiyang's. Although the pills refined by Huiyang were not high grade, they were just ordinary strength replenishing pills. However, the compatibility of 10 pills with 94% remained unbroken until the 15th day. On the 15th day, only Murongyu was left in the square. At this time, the faces of the people in the square darkened. This guy is still smelting the materials. There is still 1 day left. Can he succeed? He doesn't think that whoever finishes last will be the first, right? If it were me, I would have already dug a hole to hide. I can't afford to lose face like this. Everyone was impatient, especially those who didn't like Murongyu. They directly scolded Murongyu, regardless of whether Murongyu could hear them or not. Junior brother, Are you sure you can succeed? If you persist to the end and achieve nothing, Lu Xinkai's face turned red. If such a thing really happened, although they wouldn't blame Murong, they would definitely lose face. Junior brother doesn't need to be afraid of losing face. So what are we afraid of? Moreover, I have confidence in junior brother. Wu Xinshui, who had been worried about Murong, suddenly said with confidence. Yu Yangjia and Lu Xinkai looked at Wu Xinshui in surprise and asked in unison, 17th junior brother, why are you suddenly so confident in junior brother? Did he send you a sound transmission? Wu Xinshui shook his head. No, junior brother didn't send me a sound transmission. I don't know why I suddenly have so much confidence in him. It should be junior brother's confidence that infected me? From the beginning to the end, Murong-Yu's face always had a confident look. Look, junior brother has started to refine pills. At this time, a pill cauldron suddenly appeared in front of Murong-Yu, yin-yang cauldron. Refining pills required a pill cauldron. Otherwise, it would be difficult to form pills. In fact, many alchemists also needed the help of a pill cauldron when smelting herbs. This was because the pill cauldron could save a lot of strength and mental strength. However, there were also quite a few alchemists who only used their own flames to smelt herbs. However, this required the control of flames to reach a superb level. Otherwise, it would be easy to burn the herbs. Swish! After the yin-yang cauldron appeared, it shook in the air and a suction force burst out from inside. In the next moment, the herbs that had been smelted into liquid by Murong-Yu turned into streams of light and rushed into the yin-yang cauldron. This lunatic, he can't be directly fusing them like this, right? Seeing Murong-Yu's crazy actions, everyone was shocked. Pill formation was to fuse various herbs according to different proportions and order and then condense them into a solid pill. Under normal circumstances, the herbs would be fused according to the order. For Murong-Yu to fuse them all at once, there was only one result. The cauldron would explode. In other words, the pill refinement would fail. Therefore, when everyone saw Murong-Yu's actions, they were shocked. Murong-Yu turned a blind eye to all of this. At this moment, his mental strength was divided into thousands of portions and wrapped around thousands of liquid-like herbs. They rushed into the internal space of the yin-yang cauldron. At the same time, streams of soul power gushed out and continuously entered the herbs according to the method that Hichu had taught him. In the blink of an eye, Murong-Yu's enormous soul strength was contained within the 1,000 portions of liquid medicinal ingredients. Moreover, this soul power had no consciousness and was extremely pure. The principle of the triple transformation soul condensing pill was to fuse soul power and medicinal power together. Then, combined with the medicinal power, it would exert 1,000 times the effect and heal the injured soul. Condense the pill. After infusing all his mental strength, Murong-Yu shouted in his heart. Then, he controlled the herbs to fuse according to the order. During this process, streams of flame of primal chaos constantly spewed out from the yin-yang cauldron and fused all the liquid-like herbs together. Under the control of the flame of primal chaos and Murong-Yu, the elixirs quickly fused into a whole. After half a day, all the elixirs had fused into a ball of liquid the size of a fist. The next step was to form the pill. Turning the liquid-like elixirs into solid elixirs was an extremely important step. It was also a step that could easily fail. The raging flame of primal chaos constantly refined this ball of elixirs. This ball of elixirs was constantly solidifying at a speed visible to the naked eye. The size of a fist, the size of half a fist, break. Suddenly, Murong-Yu shouted in his heart. Then, the enormous mental strength that was wrapping around the ball of elixirs slashed down fiercely. With a bang, the ball of elixirs shattered into 10 pieces of elixirs of the same size. However, this was not the time to form a pill. Therefore, Murong-Yu continued to use the flame of primal chaos to refine the elixirs. As time passed, the elixirs continued to become rounder and smoother. Finally, they became the size of a longan. From afar, They were sparkling and translucent like transparent pearls. They emitted a strong, medicinal fragrance. When Muronyu caught a whiff of the medicinal pill's fragrance, he knew that his medicinal pill had finally been formed. Therefore, with a thought, these 10 elixirs spat out from the yin-yang cauldron. At the moment when the elixirs appeared, boom! A large 5-colored holy light appeared out of thin air and then soared into the sky. It quickly enveloped the entire square and even spread to the entire true martial temple. 5-colored holy light. At this moment, the entire true martial temple was shocked. The people in the square were even more stunned as they looked at the dazzling 5-colored holy light. Chapter 1475. 5-colored holy light. It was actually the 5-colored holy light. This was the holy light that was emitted when a supreme artifact and a pill reached a 95% compatibility. Looking at the 5-colored holy light that enveloped the entire true martial temple, everyone who saw this holy light was shocked. Some people were so excited that they didn't know what to say. For a moment, they couldn't even speak. Even the powerful inner hall disciples of the true martial sacred hall, the elders, and even the great elders of the true martial sacred hall were alarmed. 5-colored holy light, who was promoted to pill saint in true martial temple. He managed to refine a medicinal pill with 95% compatibility. Waves of incomparably huge divine senses broke through the void from the depths of true martial temple like a tidal wave and spread out. Finally, they landed on the square. These were all existences at the level of true martial temple's pillars. Because of them, true martial temple had always been at its peak. Among them, there was no lack of first-step supreme and half-step supreme existences. The reason why even experts of this level were alarmed was because of the rarity of pill saints. Looking at the entire holy world, including the demon race and the holy race, there were very few people who could become pill saints. Those people were all giants of a region. With a cough, there were powerful existences that could make the holy world tremble. This kind of person, even the true martial temple, enjoyed the treatment of a grand elder. It was precisely because of this that every alchemist dreamed of becoming a pill saint. However, the chances of becoming a pill saint were too small. Although true martial temple was known as the leader of the 10 great holy lands, there weren't many talents in refining and alchemy. Therefore, there was only one pill saint in true martial temple. And this pill saint was a peerless expert who had become famous a long time ago. And some other holy lands didn't even have a pill saint. One could imagine how high the status of pill saints was in the holy world and how rare they were, because those who descended were all peerless experts. Therefore, even if it was just a divine sense descending, the aura it emitted was extremely terrifying. For a moment, all the saints in the square felt extremely oppressed, and the stronger one was, the stronger the oppressive feeling. The people who were already quite shocked were suppressed by the huge pressure to the point that it was difficult for them to even speak. This was also the reason why the peerless experts of the true martial temple had restrained their auras to the extreme. Otherwise, if they all released their auras, most of the people in the square would be crushed. Countless divine senses instantly descended and then directly rushed to Muronyu, the 10 3 revolutions soul-condensing pills in front of him. At this moment, Muronyu was also stunned. For a moment, he did not take back these pills. 10 pills, all of them have achieved a 95% compatibility. A divine sense suddenly exclaimed in surprise. Muronyu was also a little dizzy at this time. Although Hichu had told him before that if he refined the 3 revolutions soul-condensing pill, the compatibility would definitely not be low, but he did not expect that all of them would reach 95% compatibility. Previously, Muronyu had estimated that all 10 of his elixirs would reach a 94% compatibility. One must know that there was only a 1/10 difference between 94% and 95%. But it was this 1/10 that blocked the countless alchemy grandmasters in the holy world, preventing them from becoming pill saints. Although the 5-colored holy light is a little faint, all 10 pills have reached a compatibility of 95%. This is definitely an ability that only pill saints have, and it even surpasses the ability of ordinary pill saints. Generally speaking, 10 pills would appear in a pill refinement. 10 pills were counted as a bottle. And as long as a bottle of 60% pills had a compatibility of 95%, then that alchemist could be called a pill saint. For someone like Yu, who had a 95% compatibility rate, even those pill sages who had been famous for a long time might not necessarily have the ability to do so. Hearing that voice, the people in the square were even more shocked. Jun, Li Chun, and the others' faces were terrifyingly gloomy. Pill saint. It's actually a pill saint. Haha. Jun, with a gloomy face, suddenly laughed crazily. Sun Luan and the others also fell silent. They were suppressing Yu, to the point that a heaven's pride like Yu was forced to betray the true martial temple. But they weren't afraid because they were confident. They all believed that Yu's value was far inferior to theirs. It was precisely because of this that the true martial temple turned a blind eye to their actions. But now that Yu had become a pill saint, his existence was priceless. Even if Jun, Li Chun, and the others were tied together, their value wouldn't be as high as Yu's. It wasn't even 1% of Yu's value. This was the difference between an alchemy grandmaster and a pill saint. It's just a fluke. Maybe he only refined the lowest grade pills. It's just a stroke of luck. When Lin said, with some lack of confidence, it was unknown whether he was saying this for Jun and the others or to comfort himself. Yes, it must be like that. Everyone's faces weren't as gloomy as before. What a high-grade pill, what a strong soul force. What kind of pill is this? At this moment, a surprised voice sounded again. It's definitely a high-grade saint pill. How did he refine it? These peerless powerhouses of the true martial temple talked unscrupulously. It was just that every time they spoke, it was like an iron hammer that fiercely pounded on everyone's hearts. Especially Jun and the others. After hearing the words of these peerless powerhouses, their faces turned ashen. TSK. He can refine such a high-grade pill in the profound sage realm. This boy's future is boundless. Unfortunately, he doesn't seem to be a disciple of our true martial temple. Boy, what's the name of this pill? Just as Yu was feeling dizzy, a voice suddenly rang out in his ears. 3 revolutions, soul-condensing pill. Yu said without hesitation. What? This is the legendary 3 revolutions, soul-condensing pill that has been lost for a long time. When Yu said the name of the pill, the powerhouses of the true martial temple instantly fell silent. But in the next moment, a figure appeared in front of Yu out of thin air, looking at Yu with excitement. Yu was startled by the big face that suddenly appeared in front of him. After taking a step back, he looked at the peerless powerhouse who had suddenly appeared in front of him. This was an old man with white hair and a ruddy complexion. He should be a supreme elder of the true martial temple. However, this old man was now looking at Yu with excitement. Looking at his excited appearance, Yu felt speechless. Shwa, shwa, shwa. After this old man, one figure after another appeared in front of Yu. Although the auras of these people were very obscure, they didn't seem like powerhouses. But the intense power radiating from their bodies was incomparably dazzling. You didn't even dare to look at them. They were all peerless powerhouses, the top powerhouses of the primal chaos ancestral saints. Young man, are these really 3 revolutions soul-condensing pills? A divine pill that can repair the soul? Seeing that Yu didn't answer, the old man who had asked Yu before asked again. He was extremely anxious. Yu had no choice but to nod. Great. You actually have this pill formula? Why don't you give it to me? I promise to satisfy you. No, you're not a disciple of our true martial temple. Join our true martial temple. Well, you can enjoy the treatment of a supreme elder. This, when they heard the old man's words, not only Yu, but even the surrounding people sucked in a breath of cold air. In other words, if Murong joined the true martial temple, then he would be a supreme elder of the true martial temple. A terrifying existence below one person and above tens of thousands of people. This also reflected the terror of a pill saint. Any ancestral saint's status was equivalent to a supreme elder of the true martial temple. Just thinking about it was terrifying. If I were Murong, I would immediately agree. This thought appeared in many people's minds, but it was just a thought. They were them. Murong was Murong. This couldn't be changed. Murong smiled faintly. In all honesty, this old man's conditions were good. If it were anyone else, they would definitely be tempted. Even he was a little tempted. It's over. Junior brother won't agree to this old man's conditions, right? In the distance, Wu Xinshui said with a dark face. Yu Yangjia and Lu Xiankai were also speechless. They had thought of everything, but they didn't expect the supreme elder of the true martial temple to rope in Murong. Senior, I was also a disciple of the true martial temple before. Oh, you're a disciple of the true martial temple? Hearing Murong's words, the old man was happy at first, but he quickly reacted. What do you mean by before? You're not a disciple of the true martial temple now. Supreme Elder, he has already betrayed the true martial temple and is wanted by the true martial temple. He's also wanted by our true martial temple. He's now a disciple of the unbroken path. The Holy Heavens Elder finally found an opportunity to speak and quickly interjected. Betrayed the true martial temple? Kid, is this true? Hee, you're the first disciple who dares to betray the true martial temple. Tell me what's going on. The old man wasn't a fool. He definitely knew that there was something fishy going on. In other words, he pitted Murong. It's nothing. Maybe I'm too outstanding, and some people are jealous. If I didn't escape from the true martial temple, I might have already been killed by some people. Junior appreciates Senior's good intentions. Now that I'm a disciple of the unbroken path has treated me very well. I won't join other sections. Murong bowed to the old man and said with a resolute expression, How preposterous! Who's suppressing you? Such a talent has actually been lost. The old man was furious. He turned to the Holy Heaven Elder and shouted, What's going on? Tell me in detail. Under the Supreme Elder's murderous gaze, the Holy Heaven Elder, who had a high position in the true martial temple, instantly broke out in a cold sweat. Chapter 1476. Although the Holy Heavens Elder had a high status in the true martial temple, he was far inferior to the Grand Elders. Therefore, he broke out in cold sweat when the old man looked at him. However, even though he knew it was bad, he still told the old man everything about Murong. How dare you? You're infuriating me. You're all trash. The true martial temple will decline one day in your hands. After hearing this, the old man almost exploded with anger. However, he also knew that it wasn't the right time to deal with this matter. After all, he couldn't wash his dirty linen in public. After scolding the Holy Heavens Elder and the others, he looked at Murong. When he looked at Murong, the gloominess on his face disappeared and was replaced with a smile. Young man, I won't force you. However, my words will always be effective on you. The true martial temple's doors will always be open to you. Are you selling the 3 Revolutions soul condensing pill? The true martial temple's doors would always be open to Murong. Now that they knew about Murong's potential, which sect wouldn't want to open their doors to Murong? However, Murong wouldn't walk through their doors. The true martial temple's people were probably regretting it now. Especially the elders. They were probably regretting it so much that their intestines were turning green. Hearing that, Murong merely shook his head at the old man and grinned. This old man is being rude. How can I sell such a priceless treasure? The old man laughed and didn't blame Murong. After all, if it was him, he wouldn't sell the 3 Revolutions soul condensing pills formula either. Although Murong wouldn't join the true martial temple, he wouldn't sell the pill formula to him. However, The old man didn't give up. Instead, he asked, "Can you sell one of these pills to me? Don't worry, I won't let you suffer a loss. I'll use an ancestral artifact to exchange for one pill." His one pill for an ancestral artifact? Everyone around him sucked in a breath of cold air. Medicinal pills were different from saint artifacts. After buying the sacred artifact, he could also study the pinnacle array formations inside. However, it was impossible to study the compatibility of the pills. Of course, it was also possible to deduce the pill formula from the pill. However, the success rate of reverse deduction was almost zero. The higher the grade of the pill, the harder it was to reverse engineer the pill recipe. Even if he knew all the herbs needed to refine it, it was still the same. The herbs, the ratio of the herbs, the order of fusion, the refining method, and so on were all essential. That was why the Peerless Palace had used 2 Primal Chaos ancestral artifacts to exchange for Murong Yu's Supreme Saint artifact. Now, the 3 Revolutions Soul Condensing Pill was only worth 2 ancestral artifacts. Sure. Before the old man could even finish his words, Murong Yu had already agreed to it without hesitation. The old man, who had prepared a lot of excuses, was stunned when he agreed so readily. However, he quickly came to his senses. With a flip of his hand, 2 ancestral artifacts appeared in his palm. "Since that's the case, let's trade." As he spoke, he had already grabbed a pill in his hand and handed the 2 ancestral artifacts to Murong Yu. In the next moment, his figure flashed and disappeared from the spot. It was as if he was afraid that Murong Yu would go back on his word. It was Murong Yu's turn to be stunned by the old man's speed. Why would he go back on his word? The 3 Revolutions Soul Condensing Pill was not something that could be refined as one wished. Even if Murong Yu had announced the pill formula, there were not many people in the holy world who could successfully refine it. Because the most basic condition for refining this pill was that the alchemist had to be a soul saint. Otherwise, even if the refinement was successful, it would not have the effect of condensing one's soul. Murong Yu, our Peerless Palace also needs a 3 Revolutions Soul Condensing Pill. After the old man from the true martial temple left, the powerful divine senses that lingered around Murong Yu also retreated like the tide. At this moment, the elders of the 10 sacred grounds and the other super forces gathered around, all of them looking at Murong Yu with burning gazes. The Peerless Palace's elder Xuanning said directly. However, although she said so, she did not take out any ancestral artifacts, because although she was an elder of the Peerless Palace, her status was far inferior to the true martial temple's grand elders. The true martial temple's grand elders could casually take out 2 ancestral artifacts, but she could not. Therefore, she wanted trade like before. "No problem, I will leave a pill for you. However, it will still be 2 ancestral artifacts." Murong Yu smiled and glanced at the people around him. "Murong Yu, our Purple Thunderhall also needs a 3 Revolutions Soul Condensing Pill." The elder from the Purple Thunderhall immediately became anxious and hurriedly said to Murong Yu, "Our Sky King Palace also needs one." After Elder Xuanning, the 10 sacred grounds and the other super forces all wanted a 3 Revolutions Soul Condensing Pill. Regarding this, Murong Yu did not refuse. He smiled and looked at the crowd. "Everyone, other than the one I gave to Elder Xuanning, I still have 8 3 Revolutions Soul Condensing Pills. However, I will not leave any of them for any of you." Hearing this, the faces of the elders from the Purple Thunderhall and Sky King Palace couldn't help but change. As the saying goes, the rarer something is, the more valuable it is. There are only 8 3 Revolutions Soul Condensing Pills, and everyone wants one. Then there is no other way. The one who offers the highest price will get the pill. Yes, before the martial competition, I will not leave the true martial temple. As for who the pill belongs to, that'll be up to you," Murong Yu said with a smile. It's just that his smile was very hateful in the eyes of the 8 sacred grounds. This was raising the price on the spot, but they had no choice but to accept it. At this time, many of the elders regretted. If I had known earlier, I would have built a good relationship with Murong Yu. Just like Elder Xuanning, I could have gotten one pill directly. There was no need to fight at all. This pill, our Purple Thunder Hall must have it. The elder from the Purple Thunder Hall said firmly, and at the same time, his figure flashed and disappeared. Then, some of the other elders also left, presumably to go back and prepare the ancestral artifact. Not long after, aside from Elder Xuanning, everyone else had left Murong Yu's side. Murong Yu, thank you. Elder Xuanning walked up and expressed her gratitude to Murong Yu. Murong Yu grinned. Don't thank me. If you didn't have the ancestral artifact, I wouldn't have given you the pill for free. Elder Xuanning smiled faintly. Murong Yu, the doors of our peerless palace will always be open to you. Moreover, our paragon peerless may accept a disciple. With your talent, it's very likely that you will become his disciple, if you can join the peerless palace. At this point, Elder Xuanning didn't continue, but her meaning was very clear. Murong Yu's body shook violently, and he looked at Elder Xuanning with a strange expression. Elder Xuanning merely nodded at him before her figure flashed and disappeared from Murong Yu's line of sight, leaving behind only a fragrant wind that lingered around him. Paragon Peerless wants to accept a disciple? Elder Xuanning's meaning was very clear. If Murong Yu joined the Peerless Palace, it was very likely that he would become Paragon Peerless Disciple. Paragon Peerless Disciple. Even if he was only a profound sage, he could do whatever he wanted in the holy world. Who would dare to provoke Paragon Peerless? However, Murong Yu's goal wasn't just the Primal Chaos Ancestor Sage or Paragon Peerless, but the Primal Chaos Controller that surpassed the Sovereign Realm. Moreover, he couldn't cultivate other techniques, and with the monstrous Hichu's guidance, he didn't need a master at all. But even if he didn't need one, others did. It's said that Paragon Peerless is a woman, and her disciples should all be women. If Meng Qing and the others can become Paragon Peerless Disciple, Murong Yu thought to himself, and unknowingly walked back to the seats of the infernal affairs. Meng Qing and the others are still a little weak. After this matter, I'll think of a way to raise their cultivation. Then I'll send them to the Peerless Palace. I wonder if the Peerless Palace is still accepting disciples. Murong Yu thought to himself and made up his mind. Junior brother, what are you thinking about? What did the beautiful elder of the Peerless Palace say to you? At this moment, Lu Xinkai's or Wu Xinshui's voice sounded in Murong Yu's ears. Because Elder Xuanning had been communicating with Murong Yu through telepathy, others didn't know what they were talking about. If I join the Peerless Palace, there's a chance I can become Paragon Peerless Disciple. Murong Yu calmly replied. Hearing this, Yu Yangjia and the other two looked at each other. Being a disciple of Paragon Peerless was much higher in status than being a disciple of the Infernal Affairs. Although the Infernal Affairs was powerful, the Infernal Affairs Sect Master was also extremely powerful. But after all, he wasn't a paragon. Junior brother, you agree? Wu Xinshui looked at Murong Yu and asked nervously. Being a disciple of Paragon Peerless was extremely tempting. In the entire holy world, there weren't many people who could resist this huge temptation. Looking at the nervous faces of Lu Xiankai and the other two, Murong Yu couldn't help but laugh and shook his head. No, I'm not interested in becoming a disciple of Paragon Peerless. However, I plan to send my women to try. As he spoke, he explained his plan. That's good too. If one of your women becomes a disciple of Paragon Peerless, then your status will be even higher. In the future, those who want to touch your women will have to think twice. Seeing that Murong Yu wasn't tempted, Yu Yangjia and the other two let out a sigh of relief. Thus, they began to give Murong Yu ideas. Yu Yangjia and the other two even said that they would help Murong Yu increase the strength of Yu Mengqing and the others, so that they would have a higher chance of joining the Peerless Palace. As they spoke, they had already returned to the mountain where they were temporarily staying in the true martial temple. 3 senior brothers, no, there will be a fierce battle in the future. You all should go and rest. Strive to be first. Our infernal affairs will be the big winner of this exchange. Murong Yu said in a deep voice, his face full of confidence. Chapter 1477. There were a total of 3 events in the exchange between the 10 sacred lands: pill refinement, artifact forging, and martial arts. Murong Yu is already the champion of pill refinement and artifact forging. Strictly speaking, the Infernal Agency, no, Murong Yu, was already the biggest winner. Obtaining the Heavenspan Vitality Pill and Tai Heavenspan Vitality Pill was secondary. The most important thing was that Murong Yu's reputation had risen. Some of the humans in the sacred world knew that Murong Yu was wanted by the true martial temple because he had betrayed them. But now, everyone knew of his potential in artifact forging and pill refinement. In particular, he had refined the triple transformation soul condensing pill with a 95% compatibility rate. His reputation had skyrocketed, and his status had risen along with it. After this exchange, the vast majority of the humans in the sacred world would know of his existence. Moreover, he had set things right and become a hot existence. In the past, there might have been people who wanted to make a move against him because he was wanted by the true martial temple in order to obtain rewards. But now, there were definitely not many people who would do that. On the contrary, there would be even more people who wanted to befriend him. Murong Yu wasn't just a pill sage. He might even be a weapons sage. Moreover, with his identity as a disciple of the Infernal Agency, no one dared to underestimate him anymore. In reality, Murong Yu was also a medicine sage. It was just that he hadn't displayed this ability yet. However, Murong Yu thought that since he had already welcomed 2 champions, it was only natural that he would be crowned with glory. He would also take the title of champion of the martial arts competition. Murong Yu was participating in the martial arts competition for the true martial temple's Outer Palace disciples. It was a competition between imperishable realm cultivators and ancient sages. Yu Yangjia and the others were participating in the competition between Sage Ruler and Primal Chaos Ancestor Sage. As for the competition between servant disciples, the Infernal Agency couldn't possibly win the championship. It couldn't be helped. The weakest member of the Infernal Agency was Murong Yu. However, Murong Yu is already in the imperishable realm. He couldn't possibly participate in a lower-level competition. In the following time, Yu Yangjia and the other 2 made preparations. And after the alchemy conference, even more people wanted to befriend Murong Yu. Therefore, when Murong Yu and the other 3 returned to the mountain peak, many people came to visit them. However, at this time, Murong Yu and the other 3 did not appear. Therefore, those people were only given the cold shoulder and went back. There is no lack of geniuses in the 10 great holy lands and other great powers who are capable of surpassing their cultivation realms. Although I have the ability to compete with a first-level holy king, my level is too low. In Hichu Luoshu, Murong Yu closed his eyes and pondered. Murong Yu's biggest disadvantage was his own cultivation level, although he had a strength that exceeded his own by 2 realms. However, his opponents this time were quite a few pinnacle ancient sages. And if those people also had the ability to cross realms to kill enemies, Murong Yu would not be a match for them. Let's increase our strength first. Murong Yu's eyes flashed, and then 2 ancestral artifacts and 1 chaos ancestral artifact appeared in front of him. Murong Yu had reached the profound sage realm, and sacred artifacts were no longer of any use to him. He had to refine sacred artifacts in order to continue to increase his realm. But where did he have any sacred artifacts? Therefore, if he wanted to increase his strength, he could only refine ancestral artifacts. An ordinary sacred artifact was equivalent to 10 ordinary sacred artifacts. Although it was a bit of a waste to refine ancestral artifacts now, Murong Yu had no other choice. He did not want to be defeated in the arena. He was determined to get the triple transformation Earth Mystery Pill. He opened his mouth and swallowed an ancestral artifact. Chaos Furnace, refine it for me, Murong Yu shouted in his heart. Suddenly, the Chaos Furnace shook slightly, and the indestructible ancestral artifact instantly disintegrated, turning into the most primitive power. It began to pour into Murong Yu's body like a torrent. Rumble. The power in Murong Yu's body began to rapidly increase at a speed visible to the naked eye. But soon, before he could break through, the power of the ancestral artifact had been completely swallowed by him. It was not that the ancestral artifact was too weak, but that the power Murong Yu needed was too terrifying. It should be known that an ancestral artifact was equivalent to 10 sacred artifacts. In other words, 10 sacred artifacts were unable to raise Murong Yu's realm from the first stage to the second stage. It should be known that when Murong Yu was in the undead realm, he had only consumed 20 sacred artifacts to raise his realm from the fourth stage to the fifth stage. Now, he was only in the profound sage realm. If he reached the ancient sage realm, wouldn't he have to swallow hundreds of ancestral artifacts to raise his realm? Just thinking about it made Murong Yu feel terrified. This was the price he had to pay. Who asked his strength to be so abnormal, exceeding his own by 2 realms? Everything had a price. Murong Yu could only grit his teeth and endure unless he wanted to be stuck in this realm for the rest of his life. Without any hesitation, Murong Yu swallowed the second ancestral artifact and smelted it in an instant. Feeling the power rushing into his body like a flood, Murong Yu did not hesitate. He opened his mouth and swallowed the remaining primal chaos ancestral artifact, smelting it. Bang. Bang. When an ancestral artifact was smelted, especially when it was a primal chaos ancestral artifact, the power it contained was like a storm. In an instant, Murong Yu broke through the barrier of his realm. After 2 muffled sounds, Murong Yu's realm broke through 2 realms in one go, breaking through from the first stage to the third stage. His strength had skyrocketed. Moreover, this did not stop there. His realm was still breaking through. After pausing for a moment, his body trembled once more. With a dull sound, Murong Yu's cultivation had broken through to the 4th level profound sage realm. After that, there was no more after that. Murong Yu's realm had stopped rising. The power of an ancestral artifact was 10 times that of a saint-grade artifact, and the power of a primal chaos ancestral artifact was 10 times that of an ancestral artifact. However, that was all. It only raised Murong Yu's realm from the first stage to the 4th stage, and it did not even break through to the 5th stage. This was too terrifying. With a strength 2 realms higher than his own, Murong Yu's current strength was comparable to a 4th stage Saint King. In addition to his various powerful battle skills and treasures, mid-level Saint Kings could not do anything to him. Coupled with his soul attack and the power of time, Murong Yu was confident that he could kill a 5th stage Saint King or even a 6th stage Saint King. However, it would be difficult to kill a high-level Saint King unless he launched a surprise attack. It would be difficult for a high-level Saint King to kill him. There's still one more primal chaos ancestral artifact. If I refine it, I should be able to raise my strength to the 5th or 6th stage Saint, Murong Yu thought. The peerless Saint-grade artifact that he had refined was exchanged with 2 primal chaos ancestral artifacts by the unparalleled palace. He had only refined one of them. Forget it. My ability in alchemy and weapon refinement has already caused people to hate me. Moreover, I've raised my strength from the peak of the undead stage to the 5th stage Saint in just a month. If I continue to increase my strength, I'm afraid those old monsters will make a move to kill me. When the time comes, I'll act according to the circumstances. If I can't win the championship with this strength, it won't be too late to break through then. Murong Yu decided not to continue increasing his realm. After all, there were too many examples of the tallest tree in the forest being destroyed by the wind. If he continued to defy the world, he might be captured by the old monsters of other forces as soon as he left the true martial temple. He might even be killed directly. He did not want to get into trouble. However, although he could not increase his realm, he could still improve his other battle skills. Murong Yu did not care about the primal chaos celestial records for the time being. What he was mainly interested in now was his speed and offensive ability. Bing formula and Do formula. The more powerful the Bing formula, the more abnormal Murong Yu's speed would be. Currently, the Bing formula had only reached the 4th stage. The appearance of the demon wings allowed Murong Yu's speed to exceed his own by 2 large realms. It was comparable to the speed of a peak Saint King, and even exceeded it. The Do formula was also at the 4th stage, and could increase his strength by 2 large realms. Speaking of the Do formula, Murong Yu felt very strange. It was as if the Do formula had become one with him. Even if he did not use the Do formula, Murong Yu's strength exceeded his own by 2 large realms. Even if he used it, Murong Yu's combat strength would only increase by a little. It was better than nothing. However, if he did not have the Do formula, Murong Yu felt that his combat strength would not be as abnormal as it was now. I wonder if the Do formula will allow me to directly exceed my combat strength by 3 large realms if I reach the 5th stage? Murong Yu thought to himself. The Zai formula could allow Murong Yu to directly travel through the void. If the Bing formula and the Zai formula were combined, the effect would far surpass just one of the two. It would even surpass the result of 1 + 1 = 2. The formation formula was extremely useful for stealth and sneak attacks and escape. The Zhe formula was used to cultivate the soul. The Lai formula was used to control time. Murong Yu had already obtained 6 words of the 9 syllables formula, and only the Lin, Jie, and Qian characters were left. However, Murong Yu did not know where these 3 words were. Moreover, not to mention these 3 words, even if he obtained these words, it would be extremely difficult to improve them. After all, with each word improvement, Murong Yu's combat strength would directly double, or even multiply several times. However, just because it was difficult to improve, it did not mean that there was no need to cultivate. In the following time, Murong Yu increased the time acceleration ability of the Hichu Luo Shu to the limit and began to cultivate various combat skills, including the 9 syllables formula. In the blink of an eye, half a month had passed in the outside world. On this day, Murong Yu stepped out of the Hichu Luo Shu. His face was expressionless, and no one could see any changes. However, the eyes of Yu Yangjia and the other 2 who had been waiting for him in the hall lit up. Chapter 1478. 4th Level Profound Sage. Murong Yu didn't suppress his cultivation. Moreover, Yu Yangjia and the other 2's cultivation was much higher than Murong Yu's, so they could see his cultivation at a glance. In half a month, he had advanced by 3 small realms. Even though Yu Yangjia and the other 2 were used to Murong Yu's rapid advancement, they were still shocked at such a speed. However, this was only one aspect. What made their eyes light up was Murong Yu's other aspects. At this time, Murong Yu didn't seem to have changed much, except that his cultivation was higher and he was more powerful. However, it gave Yu Yangjia and the other 2 a different feeling. They felt that Murong Yu was more confident, and he was more domineering. Yes, they all felt a domineering aura from Murong Yu. In fact, Yu Yangjia and the other 2 even had an inexplicable feeling of wanting to submit to Murong Yu. Of course, this feeling was very weak. If it weren't for their sharp senses, they wouldn't have felt it at all. It had no effect on experts at their level. However, they felt a sense of familiarity with Murong Yu and couldn't help but want to get closer to Murong Yu. They were subdued by Murong Yu's aura. In fact, even they didn't know about this subtle feeling. Even Murong Yu wasn't clear about it. The reason for this situation was mainly because of the Zhe character. The Zhe character was used to cultivate and strengthen the soul. However, it was different from ordinary soul cultivation methods. The Zhe character had the ability to subdue other people's souls without leaving a trace. Murong Yu's ability was extremely powerful. Even when those people's souls were subdued by Murong Yu, they didn't even realize that their souls had been controlled by Murong Yu. Murong Yu didn't control or subdue other people's souls. However, the might of the Zhe character made him emit a domineering aura that looked down on the world. In fact, this kind of domineering aura was also imperceptibly affecting the souls of others. These people began to feel close to Murong Yu from their souls, and even became willing to become Murong Yu's subordinates. This was the ability of a leader. Any leader, whether it was a general or a king of a dynasty in the mortal world, or a leader of a force in the cultivation world or the saint world, would have such an aura. Otherwise, how could they have so many disciples and apprentices who were willing to risk their lives for them? Murong Yu was originally the sacred lord of the primal chaos Shenzhen. From the cultivation world until now, his leadership aura had grown stronger and stronger. With the enhancement of the swordsman formula, even an expert like Murong Yu would have a good impression of Murong Yu and unknowingly want to get close to him. This was the reason why Murong Yu had become more and more powerful after practicing the swordsman formula. During these years of cultivation, Hichu, Luoshu world time, his various combat skills had become even more powerful, especially the swordsman formula. His soul was getting stronger and stronger, and his soul pool had expanded to 10,000 miles in size. However, his soul realm was only at 3-star level 2 and had not even reached 3-star level 3. One should know that the soul pool of an ordinary soul saint was only 12,000 miles in size. Now, Murong Yu had the ability to protect himself even if he were to face a high-level holy king. It was even possible for him to kill a high-level holy king in an explosive state. Senior brothers, why are you looking at me like that? Seeing the three of them looking at him, Murong Yu could not help but ask in surprise. Being awakened by Murong Yu's words, Yu Yangjia and the other two could not help but look at each other. Then, they saw the astonishment in each other's eyes. What kind of technique did Junior Brother cultivate? It even affected our minds? In fact, what was affected was their souls and not their minds. Junior Brother, you are a little different. I believe you will surpass me soon, Wu Xinshui said with a smile, but when he spoke, he was a little lonely. Before Murong Yu joined the Infernal Organization, although he was the weakest and had the lowest realm, he did not feel any pressure. However, he didn't feel any pressure. After all, he had joined the team for the shortest time and was much younger than the others. However, after Murong Yu joined the Infernal Organization, although Murong Yu was only at the undead realm at that time, the difference between him and Wu Xinshui was like heaven and earth. However, Murong Yu's aptitude and talent in all aspects, especially his cultivation speed, made Wu Xinshui feel great pressure. At this rate, it was only a matter of time before Murong Yu surpassed him, and he had been stuck at the peak of Ancestor Saint for a long time. Noticing the desolation in Wu Xinshui's eyes, Murong Yu smiled and patted Wu Xinshui's shoulder. He sincerely said, 17th Senior Brother, perhaps you'll make a breakthrough during the martial competition. The martial arts competition that Wu Xinshui participated in was a battle between Sage Kings, Ancestor Saints, and Primal Chaos Ancestor Saints. With his strength, it would be difficult for him to get into the top 10, but he still came to participate. Obviously, he wanted to use this battle as an opportunity to break through his current realm. After all, the 10 sacred lands had never lacked powerful geniuses. Wu Xinshui nodded and did not say anything. He turned and walked outside. Nothing needed to be said. Murong Yu, you have finally appeared. Our Purple Thunder Hall has been waiting here for a long time. Our Purple Thunder Hall has decided to use 3 ancestral artifacts to exchange for your 3 Revolutions soul condensing pill. Just as Murong Yu's group of 3 appeared outside the mountain, a thunderous voice resounded through the air. Then whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Silhouettes appeared out of thin air around Murong Yu's group of 4, completely surrounding them. Ha! Purple Thunder Hall is really generous. Our cloud-piercing island will use 4 ancestral artifacts to exchange for a 3 Revolutions soul condensing pill. Before the Purple Thunder Hall elder could finish speaking, the cloud-piercing island elder laughed loudly. While mocking the Purple Thunder Hall for being stingy, he also called out his own price. Big Dipper Sect for top-grade ancestral artifacts. A deep voice sounded. 9 Cauldrons Sect for top-grade ancestral artifacts. Murong Yu was dumbfounded as he listened to the competing bids. Then he remembered what was going on. Murong Yu, these are our unparalleled palace's 4 ancestral artifacts. At this moment, The beautiful elder Snow Ning of Unparalleled Palace slowly walked over and handed a storage ring to Murongyu. Murongyu looked at Elder Snow Ning in surprise. Just as he was about to speak, Elder Snow Ning spoke first. The 3 Revolutions soul condensing pill is definitely worth more than 2 ancestral artifacts. Our Unparalleled Palace also doesn't want to take advantage of you, so we've decided to use 4 ancestral artifacts to exchange for it. Murongyu laughed and no longer acted pretentious. He accepted the storage ring that Elder Xuan Ning handed over and tossed a jade bottle to Elder Xuan Ning. Before this, he had already packed the remaining 9 pills into his bag. "Thank you," Elder Snow Ning said after receiving the pills, then gracefully left. Unparalleled Palace, that bastard. The others looked at Elder Xuan Ning's back and gritted their teeth. Unparalleled Palace was helping Murongyu raise the price. Before this, Unparalleled Palace had only used 2 ancestral artifacts to exchange for a 3 Revolutions soul condensing pill with Murongyu. Thus, the Purple Thunder Hall and the other sacred grounds only wanted to offer 3 or 4 ancestral artifacts. But now that Unparalleled Palace had doubled the price and publicly announced that the 3 Revolutions soul condensing pill was worth more than 2 ancestral artifacts, how could they dare to only offer 3 or 4 ancestral artifacts? They weren't that thick-skinned, nor were they that shameless. Not to mention whether or not Murongyu would exchange with them. Even if he did, they would be called stingy. People from the 10 great sacred grounds cared most about their face. Our Purple Thunder Hall will use 5 ancestral artifacts to exchange for a single 3 Revolutions soul condensing pill. The Purple Thunder Hall elder said through gritted teeth. To be honest, 1 3 Revolutions soul condensing pill for 5 ancestral artifact was a bit expensive. A 95% compatibility 3 Revolutions soul condensing pill can even repair the soul of a primal chaos ancestral artifact expert. Could it be that the Purple Thunder Hall's primal chaos ancestral sage is only worth 5 ancestral artifacts? Before Murongyu could speak, Lu Xiankai said indifferently, "Little junior brother, these 3 Revolutions soul condensing pills are so precious that even our unparalleled society doesn't have them. Why don't you give them to us, and we'll use a primal chaos ancestral artifact to exchange with you?" Yu Yangjia said indifferently. The elders of the 7 great sacred grounds fell silent. A primal chaos ancestral artifact for a single pill? Although the 3 Revolutions soul condensing pill could repair the soul of a primal chaos ancestral sage. But if a primal chaos ancestral artifact was used well, it was equivalent to a primal chaos ancestral sage. However, to activate the full power of a primal chaos ancestral artifact, one had to reach the primal chaos ancestral sage realm. This was an equivalent exchange. Everyone fell silent. Although they were elders, they hadn't reached the stage where they could make decisions. His price was a bit too high. "Forget it, senior brother. I've promised them before that I'll sell the pill to whoever offers the highest price. You don't want me to be a petty person who breaks my promise, right?" At this time, Murongyu finally spoke. Hearing this, the elders of the Purple Thunder Hall let out a sigh of relief. They also had a good impression of Murongyu in their hearts. However, Murongyu's next words made them gnash their teeth in hatred. "This one then, 10 ancestral artifacts. 1 pill for 10 ancestral artifacts." Murongyu extended a finger with a smile on his face. The elders of the Heavenly Dipper sect could not help but twitch. Murongyu was simply asking for too much. However, they could only give these ancestral artifacts to Murongyu. The Rising Sky sect will take it. The elders of the Rising Sky sect gritted their teeth and handed a storage ring to Murongyu. Murongyu accepted the storage ring with a smile on his face. After checking that there were no mistakes, he handed a jade bottle to the elders. Therefore, the elders of the Purple Thunder Hall and the 9 Cauldron sect could only reluctantly hand over the 10 ancestral artifacts to Murongyu in exchange for a single 3 Revolutions soul condensing pill. "Everyone, you're welcome to come again in the future. Muronyu waved at their backs with a smile as they left. However, the elders of the Purple Thunder Hall suddenly sped up and left without looking back. Chapter 1479. The martial arts competition was divided into 3 levels. Sages, great sages, and undead realms were on the same level, which was equivalent to the true martial temple's odd job disciples. This level of competition was held in the true martial temple's preparatory hall and was not qualified to enter the inner hall. After all, the odd job disciples of the true martial temple were only in the undead realm and were not even qualified to enter the outer hall. The second level of competition was between the undead realm, profound sage, and ancient sage. It was equivalent to the outer hall disciples of the true martial temple. This level of competition with the sage kings, ancestral sages, and primal chaos ancestral sages were all held in the inner hall of the true martial temple. It was the square where the alchemy and equipment refining conventions were held. However, it was divided into 2 areas. The outer and inner hall disciples were each in their own area and did not interfere with each other. In fact, the entire square was separated by a huge restriction. Of course, this division was mainly for the inside of the square and could be seen from the outside. This way, the battle between the 2 levels would not be affected by the battle between the 2 levels. At the same time, the spectators would not be affected. They could choose to watch the battle that they wanted to watch. Moreover, many arenas had appeared out of thin air in the square. These arenas were used for martial arts competitions. As soon as Muronyu stepped into the square, a strange feeling appeared in his heart. At the same time, the 9 syllables in Murongyu's body started to operate automatically. This is, Muronyu turned pale with fright. He had encountered this situation before because he had encountered the other words of the 9 syllables. Could it be that one of the other 3 words of the 9 syllables had been cultivated by someone, and the person who cultivated it was also in the square? Muronyu suppressed the shock and excitement in his heart and looked in the direction of the feeling. Heaven-suppressing sect, although not as strong as the 10 great holy lands, was still very powerful. It was one of the most powerful forces outside of the 10 great holy lands. Everyone in heaven-suppressing sect wanted to pull down one of the 10 great holy lands so that they could take over. This was the ambition of heaven-suppressing sect. Shui Yuanhua was a young expert who had suddenly emerged in heaven-suppressing sect in recent years. Several hundred years ago, Shui Yuanhua was already an outer sect disciple of the heaven-suppressing sect. However, his aptitude was only ordinary. This was because the heaven-suppressing sect wasn't like the seamless path and the other sacred grounds. If a miracle didn't happen, Shui Yuanhua would never be able to step into the imperishable realm. However, several hundred years ago, he had a fortuitous encounter. Ever since he encountered a fortuitous encounter, his cultivation had skyrocketed. In just a few hundred years, he had already become an ancient sage pinnacle expert. Although his combat strength was not too strong and did not exceed his own realm, his defense was extremely terrifying. It was said that when he had just broken through to the ancient saint stage, he had relied on his terrifying defensive ability to exhaust a saint king who had been pursuing him to death. He had killed him instead. Therefore, although he did not have battle prowess that exceeded his cultivation level, his defensive ability made up for his lack of attack power. According to Shui Yuanhua's current cultivation speed, he believed that it wouldn't be long before he broke through to the primal chaos ancestor realm. He would definitely become an elder of the heaven-suppressing sect. Therefore, the heaven-suppressing sect was focusing on nurturing him as the successor of the sect master. Therefore, he had also come to participate in the exchange of the 10 sacred grounds. His goal was very simple. He wanted to suppress everything and become the champion of the second level. Swish! Shui Yuanhua, who had been resting with his eyes closed, suddenly opened his eyes. His gaze was like a sharp knife piercing through the sky as he looked into the distance. Boom! The 2 fiercely collided in the void, creating a violent collision. What does he have that can make my cultivation method automatically operate? Shui Yuanhua was shocked. Before he even met Murong Yu's gaze, the cultivation technique in his body had already begun to stir. After meeting Murong Yu's gaze, his cultivation method actually began to operate quickly. He has something on him that can make my cultivation method break through. Shui Yuanhua instantly reacted. Then, he looked at Murong Yu and smiled ferociously. Profound Saint Stage? You'd better pray that you don't meet me in the martial competition. Otherwise, Shui Yuanhua smiled ferociously and licked his lips. This guy used to be the lowest existence in the heaven-suppressing sect and was bullied all day long. After his rise, he used bloody means to kill all the people who had bullied him before. His methods were extremely cruel. Shui Yuanhua didn't know that it was the 9 syllables in Murong Yu's body that made his cultivation method automatically operate. Because he hadn't encountered any other 9 syllables, he only thought that Murong Yu had something special on him. But Murong Yu was no stranger to this kind of situation. Seeing Murong Yu look at Shui Yuanhua, Lu Xiankai explained, "That's the heaven-suppressing sect. They're quite strong and want to replace our position as one of the 10 sacred grounds." Murong Yu nodded and grinned at Shui Yuanhua, who was smiling ferociously at him before withdrawing his gaze. This person must have one of the 3 characters of the 9 syllables on him. I must seize this character, no matter what. Murong Yu thought in his heart as he strode towards the seats of the secret society. Senior apprentice Brother Murong Yu, Yuqin greets you. Before Murong Yu could go to his seat, a figure floated over from the distance and finally stood in front of Murong Yu, bowing to him. A voice as pleasant as an oriole's entered the ears of Murong Yu and the others. Murong Yu looked over and saw a young girl in a light green palace dress, who was about 16 years old, smiling at him like a flower. Murong Yu was surprised, but although he didn't know the identity of the other party, he still returned the greeting. Yuqin is a disciple of the Unparalleled Palace and is also on the list for the martial arts tournament. When the time comes, I hope that senior apprentice Brother Murong Yu will be merciful. Fei Yuqin said with a smile. Senior apprentice Sister Fei must be joking. I'm just a profound sage, while senior apprentice Sister Fei should be at the peak of the ancient sage realm, right? I'm afraid the one who will be merciful is senior apprentice sister. Murong Yu said with a smile. While Murong Yu and Fei Yuqin were talking, gazes filled with hostility from all directions were constantly breaking through the void and landing on Murong Yu. It wasn't that Murong Yu and Fei Yuqin were talking and laughing that made people jealous, but because Murong Yu had been in the limelight before. Even if there were many elders from various factions who wanted to befriend Murong Yu, that was the intention of these elders and the factions behind them. Which one of these people present wasn't a genius? Murong Yu's strength in alchemy and weapon refinement had indeed intimidated some people. However, the majority of people were not convinced. These people were all arrogant geniuses, and each of them was an elite disciple of their respective factions. If they could trample on Murong Yu, who had been in the limelight for the past few days, then they would be even more impressive. It was precisely because of this mentality that many people were full of hostility towards Murong Yu. Among them, Murong Yu felt a few extremely powerful existences from these hostile gazes. Shui Yuanhua, whom he had met before, was one of them. There were also some powerhouses from other factions, and some of them were even much stronger than Shui Yuanhua. Even Fei Yuqin, who was talking to Murong Yu, was very powerful, giving Murong Yu a lot of pressure. These were all powerful obstacles for Murong Yu to win the championship. However, even so, Murong Yu wasn't discouraged, and his heart was even filled with fighting spirit. Only with pressure would there be motivation. These so-called geniuses would be fine if they didn't meet him. But if they met Murong Yu, then they were destined to become a stepping stone for Murong Yu's growth. After chatting with Murong Yu for a while, Fei Yuqin went back. Soon after, the martial arts competition officially began. The second level of the competition was for those in the imperishable realm, profound sage realm, and ancient sage realm. There were 10,000 arenas in the plaza. There were 10,000 square meters in total, and they could accommodate 20,000 people at the same time. It should be known that there were no restrictions in this competition. As long as one had reached the undead realm and hadn't surpassed the ancient sage realm, they could participate. Therefore, there were a lot of disciples of the true martial temple on the stage. In addition to the seamless division, many people from the other 8 great holy lands had also come to participate. Adding in the various other forces, there were perhaps hundreds of thousands of people. However, the competition was extremely fast because the gap in strength between the undead realm, profound sage realm, and ancient sage realm was too big. Apart from a true martial temple, the people from the other forces who came to participate were basically powerhouses in the ancient sage realm or some extremely powerful profound sages. When an undead realm sage encountered a profound sage or ancient sage, they would basically be killed in an instant. Of course, in principle, killing was not allowed in the arena. Therefore, these people were easily defeated. Only those who wanted to be on the same level as them would have a fierce battle between dragons and tigers. Shui Yuanhua against Ouyang Feng. At this moment, an elder of the true martial temple who was presiding over the competition shouted. Immediately, Shui Yuanhua stepped onto the arena. His opponent was also a peak ancient sage. Boy, I'll let you have 10 moves, Shui Yuanhua said to Ouyang Feng with a contemptuous look. Ouyang Feng was furious. Without saying a word, he summoned a powerful sacred tool and then burst out with his strongest attack, fiercely attacking Shui Yuanhua. Shui Yuanhua grinned and shouted, "Immovable bright king seal." Just as he shouted, Muron saw his hands waving in an instant, forming an obscure hand seal in front of his chest. Boom! The moment the hand seal was formed, a mass of holy light burst out from his body, and then a shimmering shield of holy light shrouded Shui Yuanhua. Bang! The moment the shield appeared, Ouyang Feng's sacred tool smashed down with great force. After an explosion, Shui Yuanhua's shield didn't move at all, but Ouyang Feng's sacred tool was shaken back. Ouyang Feng's face turned pale, and he retreated a few steps in a row. A trace of blood even spilled from the corner of his mouth. Chapter 1480. What a strong defense! Seeing this scene, most of the people in the square were attracted to it. Even those who were originally paying attention to the battle of the Inner Hall disciples were attracted to it. Shui Yuanhua was not injured at all. He was not even shaken. He had only formed an Akalanatha print. Not only did the print have a strong defense, but it also had a rebounding force. It could directly injure an opponent who was of similar strength. Ouyang Feng's face was red as he steadied himself. The power in his body surged rapidly and quickly suppressed the impetuous blood flow. He looked at Shui Yuanhua with eyes full of anger and humiliation. In the same realm, not only was he unable to defeat his opponent, but he was also injured by his opponent. If his opponent was a king sage, he could accept it. However, they were of similar strength. This was a disgrace. 9 more moves, Shui Yuanhua looked at Ouyang Feng and said with disdain. Ouyang Feng was furious. He roared and took a step forward, pouncing on Shui Yuanhua. Boom! However, the result was the same. Shui Yuanhua was still standing on the spot like a sacred mountain. However, Ouyang Feng was once again sent flying. However, Ouyang Feng was prepared. This time he was not sent flying. 8 more moves. Shui Yuanhua's disdainful voice stimulated Ouyang Feng's expression, making him look ferocious. Boom! 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 Ouyang Feng was furious and attacked Shui Yuanhua crazily. However, no matter what kind of attack he used, he could not break through Shui Yuanhua's defense. This made the crowd even more shocked. Shui Yuanhua's defense is so strong. Even a king sage can't break through his defense, right? Someone said in shock. No one knew if he was asking someone else or talking to himself. Haven't you heard? Not long ago, Shui Yuanhua exhausted a king sage to death. From the moment he entered the ring, Ouyang Feng was destined to lose. Countless people looked at Shui Yuanhua with gleaming eyes. Naturally, Murong-yu was included. It's definitely one of the words in the 9 symbolic words. I wonder what it is. Murong-yu squinted his eyes and looked at Shui Yuanhua in the ring, but he was thinking. The 9 words mantra was one of the most powerful techniques in the world. Legend had it that if one could gather all 9 characters, they would have unimaginable achievements. Each word of the 9 syllables mantra was a powerful cultivation technique or battle skill. It could be said that it had both offensive and defensive capabilities. There was the fighting formula for attack and the Bing formula for speed. There were also soul cultivation techniques, time and space, and even invisibility. Of course, there would be defenses as well. Murong-yu had almost everything, except for a powerful defensive cultivation method. If Shui Yuanhua's powerful defensive cultivation method was used by Murong-yu, the effect would be even more terrifying. I wonder what stage he has reached in his cultivation of this word. Murong-yu thought to himself. He was even more determined to snatch the word that Shui Yuanhua was cultivating. You can leave now. While Murong-yu was thinking, Ouyang Feng had already made 10 moves. At this moment, Shui Yuanhua finally retaliated. After laughing a few times, he kicked Ouyang Feng away. In fact, Shui Yuanhua's offensive power was far less powerful than his defensive power. It was just that Ouyang Feng was furious under the humiliation. In the 10 moves, he used all his strength. Therefore, after 10 moves, his strength was almost exhausted. Therefore, Shui Yuanhua was able to win in 1 move. In fact, Shui Yuanhua had exhausted Ouyang Feng's strength. Shui Yuanhua wins. An elder of the true martial temple, who was hosting the martial arts competition, immediately announced the result. Shui Yuanhua glanced disdainfully at Murong-yu. Finally, his eyes stopped on Murong-yu. At the same time, he made a beheading gesture. Whoosh! There was an uproar in the square. Shui Yuanhua wanted to challenge Murong-yu. However, would Murong-yu be able to defeat Shui Yuanhua? After all, although Murong-yu's strength was strong, he was only a profound sage. Shui Yuanhua could even exhaust a Saint King stage powerhouse to death, let alone Murong-yu. In response to Shui Yuanhua's provocation, Murong-yu just smiled indifferently in response. It would be fine if this guy didn't cultivate the 9 characters mantra, but now, he would definitely die. The martial arts competition continued. One by one, the geniuses competed and killed in all directions. However, not many people could attract Murong-yu's attention, except for a limited number of people. For example, True Martial Temple's Han Zhengyang, Rising Sky Sect's Yang Kongping, Purple Thunder Hall's Huang Mingzhi, Sky King Palace's Shi Kangsheng, and so on. Apart from the Seamless Society, each of the 10 Great Holy Lands had an extremely powerful existence. Of course, it didn't mean that each of the 10 Great Holy Lands only had one powerful disciple among so many disciples. The other disciples were also very powerful, and they were all peerless geniuses outside. However, only these people were qualified to be Murong-yu's opponents. Although these people were only at the Ancient Saint stage, they gave Murong-yu an extremely powerful feeling. Murong-yu could sense that these people had strength that surpassed their cultivation base. Although Shui Yuanhua's strength did not surpass his cultivation base, his tortoiseshell was extremely powerful. He could be considered an opponent. At this moment, the voice of the true martial temple's elder reverberated in the air. Murong-yu of the Seamless faction versus Sun Qing of true martial temple. Murong-yu smiled indifferently and slowly stood up. He took a step forward and appeared in the arena in just a flash. Murong-yu, you're a traitor of true martial temple, yet you still dare to appear in the arena today? Very well. I'll teach you a lesson on behalf of your elders today. Sun Qing of true martial temple flew up and shouted at Murong-yu. At the same time, he struck out with his palm, shattering the void and slapping towards Murong-yu. He actually attacked with all his strength, wanting to kill Murong-yu with one palm. A cold, murderous intent flashed in Murong-yu's eyes. His parents died when he was young, and he was bullied in Murong's family. He had no other elders at all. The elders that Sun Qing mentioned were Murong Yu's parents. Although Murong Yu's memories of his parents were very vague, his parents were irreplaceable in his heart. No one could replace them. Sun Qing's words had successfully angered Murong Yu's murderous intent. Immediately, Murong Yu smiled coldly. One move. I only need one move to make you eat shit. You're courting death. Sun Qing flew into a rage. With a monstrous aura, he attacked from all directions. However, Murong Yu only sneered. Instead of retreating, he took a step forward. He didn't seem to make any movements, but his right hand suddenly stretched out. His 5 fingers spread open, and he slapped Sun Qing fiercely. Bang! 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 Murong Yu's big hand didn't erupt with any powerful aura or power. However, wherever his big hand passed, Sun Qing's power turned into dust. It couldn't even withstand a single blow. Sun Qing was taken aback, and his face revealed a shocked expression. However, he didn't believe it. An even more violent power gushed out, wanting to kill Murong Yu. However, all of this was in vain. In front of absolute strength, everything he did was so fragile. Bang! In the blink of an eye, Murong Yu's large hand had already landed on Sun Qing's body. Sun Qing only had time to let out a scream. Then his whole body was slapped to the ground by Murong Yu. He was lying on the ground in a dog-eating shit posture. Murong Yu really did what he said. He defeated Sun Qing, an ancient saint, with just one palm. Sun Qing was lying on the ground. His face was red with shame and anger. He wanted to get up, but there was nothing he could do. This was because when Murong Yu slapped him, he had already sealed his power. Get out of here, Murong Yu shouted coldly. He kicked Sun Qing out of the arena. At the same time, Murong Yu also stepped out and left the arena. At this time, the elder of the true martial temple announced that Murong Yu was the winner. This Murong Yu is really powerful. He has at least the strength of an entire realm, or even more. Although Murong Yu had left the arena, his strength still made many people think. Although Sun Qing's strength was not very good, he was still a 6th rank ancient saint. Yet, he was sent flying by Murong Yu with one palm. Was Murong Yu not strong enough? The most important thing was that Murong Yu was only a 4th rank profound sage. However, if that was all, there was nothing to worry about. Many powerhouses smiled faintly. They did not put Murong Yu in their eyes. Murong Yu had strength that surpassed his realm, but so did they. Moreover, the current realm was the biggest gap between them. Get out of here! When Murong Yu returned to his seat, a familiar voice came from the other side of the square. It was the place where the inner hall disciples were competing. Murong Yu was familiar with this voice. Murong Yu immediately turned his head to look, only to see a shocking sword ray soaring into the sky. The sword light was extremely sharp and fierce. It emitted an incomparably terrifying sword intent that enveloped the entire arena. If it weren't for the array formations and restrictions outside the arena, this terrifying sword intent would have enveloped the entire square, injuring many saints who weren't very strong. In front of the sword light, a primal chaos ancestor saint expert was sent flying like a broken kite and fell out of the arena. Wu Xinshui stood on the arena with a long sword in his hand. His face was a little pale. It was obvious that this battle was very difficult for him. After all, he was only an ancestor sage while his opponent was a chaotic ancestor sage. However, Wu Xinshui still won. He defeated a chaotic ancestor sage with the strength of an ancestor sage. Whoosh! After Wu Xinshui returned, he sat down cross-legged and seemed to have comprehended something. Murong Yu did not disturb him. He just set up a soundproof restriction around him and turned his attention back to the martial arts competition. At this time, Yu Yangjia and Lu Xiankai returned. There was no suspense. Both of them fought very easily. Yu Yangjia was extremely powerful. Even if he encountered a high-level chaotic ancestor sage, he was easily defeated by him. Lu Xiankai was even luckier. His opponent was only a Sage King. Before the battle even started, the Sage King automatically admitted defeat. Chapter 1481. Apart from the disciples of the true martial sacred hall, those who were qualified to participate in this martial competition were all geniuses among geniuses from their respective factions. However, as the saying goes, there is always someone better than you, and there's always someone stronger than you. Even if they were all geniuses among geniuses, there was still a huge gap between them. As the martial competition continued, those peerless geniuses finally stood out. For example, Mu Rongyu of the Infernal Society, Shui Yuanhua of the Heaven-Suppressing Sect, Mei Shanshan of the Bailuo Palace, and the others finally revealed their ferociousness. All of them were extremely powerful, and their opponents were basically unable to shake them. Almost all of their battles were decided in a short period of time. It wasn't that their opponents were too weak, but that they were too strong. These people all had strength that surpassed their own cultivation realm. Moreover, these people were all in the ancient saint realm. In other words, they all had the strength of a saint king. At their level, the peak of the ancient saint realm was the highest cultivation realm. Without the participation of saint kings, these people were invincible. The final battle would be between them, and the champion could only be chosen from them. Each of the 10 sacred lands had one. Apart from the 10 sacred lands, the heaven-suppressing sect also had Shui Yuanhua. In other words, the champion this time would be chosen from the 11 of them. The people from the 10 sacred lands weren't surprised at all. This was because they all knew the situation of their own disciples, and they even knew about the people from the other sacred lands. However, the sudden rise of the heaven-suppressing sect Shui Yuanhua was something that the 10 sacred lands didn't expect. Naturally, the heaven-suppressing sect was overjoyed with this result. Even if Shui Yuanhua didn't win in the end, being able to enter the top 10 was extremely good news for the heaven-suppressing sect. Because if Shui Yuanhua could enter the top 10, it meant that one of the 10 sacred lands would be defeated by him. From another perspective, the heaven-suppressing sect was even stronger than the sacred land whose disciple Shui Yuanhua defeated. This could greatly increase the prestige of the heaven-suppressing sect and allow them to recruit more genius disciples. This was undoubtedly extremely beneficial to the heaven-suppressing sect. Not to mention that Shui Yuanhua was one of the most popular candidates for the championship. It wasn't because of his powerful attack power, but because of his terrifying defense. Shui Yuanhua's defense made the disciples of the 9 Holy Lands frown. Presumably, they could not think of a way to break Shui Yuanhua's tortoiseshell. Only Mu Rongyu's expression remained unchanged from the start to the end. Soon, the final result was out. There were still 12 people left. Each of the 10 sacred grounds had a genius disciple, heaven-suppressing sect Shui Yuanhua, and Star Moon Observatory's disciple Hua Wenlin, whose strength was on par with heaven-suppressing sects. Only one more battle, and he would be able to enter the top 10. At the same time, the battles of the highest level had also entered the top 10. Although Wu Xinshui was strong, his opponents were basically all at the primal chaos ancestor sage level. Therefore, in the end, he stopped within the top 50. Even Wu Xinshui, who was only at the ancestor saint realm, was quite satisfied with this result. However, to his regret, he was unable to make a breakthrough in his cultivation base during these battles. However, he had already comprehended something. He believed that it would not take long for him to break through to the primal chaos ancestor saint level. As for Lu Xiankai, he was at the primal chaos ancestor sacred realm. He was much stronger than Wu Xinshui. Therefore, his ranking was also very high, at the 11th place. Unfortunately, he was defeated by a primal chaos ancestor saint from True Martial Temple. However, Lu Xiankai was not depressed. After all, this result was already considered good. Moreover, he did not intend to be the champion in the first place. This was because this task had already been given to Yu Yangjia. Hua Wenlin versus Fei Yuqin. Hua Wenlin was a peerless genius of Star Moon Observatory's younger generation. Fei Yuqin was a beautiful expert of the Unparalleled Palace's younger generation. A fierce battle between a dragon and a tiger took place. In the end, the Unparalleled Palace's foundation was stronger. Although their strength was about the same, Fei Yuqin's various secret techniques were more powerful. She was superior and defeated Hua Wenlin. While these two peerless geniuses were fighting, True Martial Temple's Han Jingyang also welcomed his strongest opponent in the martial arts competition so far, Tiangang Sect's Fu Yushu. Both of them were at the peak of the ancient saint realm. At the same time, they had powerful strength that surpassed their own cultivation base. Moreover, they were both peerless experts of the 10 sacred grounds. Their battle was much more intense than Hua Wenlin and Fei Yuqin's battle. It was a fierce battle between a dragon and a tiger. It could be said that the sky was falling and the earth was splitting. The battle quickly entered a white-hot stage. In the end, both of them used all kinds of methods. Powerful sacred artifacts collided violently in the void, erupting with incomparably terrifying power. True martial scripture, Tiangang technique. In the end, the two of them even used the secret techniques of their respective sacred grounds and launched the most intense battle. However, the two of them were still evenly matched. In the end, the two of them even fought to consume each other's strength. In the end, Han Jingyang defeated Fu Yushu with a slight advantage and eliminated Fu Yushu, successfully entering the top 10. Among the 10 sacred grounds, Tiangang Sect was the first to be eliminated, while Heaven Suppressing Sect was the first to enter. This result made everyone's jaws drop. However, it was also within their expectations. In order to save time, the experts of the True Martial Temple came out to treat the injuries of Fei Yuqin and Han Zhengyang, who had just fought a great battle. Moreover, they used precious medicinal pills to replenish their energy to the peak. Then, the top 10 competition began. Heaven-suppressing sects Shui Yuanhua versus Purple Thunder Hall's Huang Mingjie. Rising Skies sects Yang Comping versus Cloud-piercing Islands Fengxian. Murong Yu versus Sky King Palaces Shikangxing. True Martial Temples Han Jingyang versus Nine Cauldrons sects Hegaojia. Peerless Palaces Fei Yuqin versus Bai Luo Palaces Mei Shanshan. Since they had already entered the top 10 competition, the arenas in the square had been removed. Only one pair of people was allowed to fight at a time. This was also to make it easier for the spectators to watch the battles. Huang Mingjie, you're no match for me. Admit defeat. Otherwise, I'll make you lose miserably. Shui Yuanhua was the first to enter the arena. However, as soon as he entered the arena, he spoke arrogantly, causing Purple Thunder Hall's peerless genius, Huang Mingjie's eyes to spit fire. Others might be afraid of your tortoise shell, but I'm not. Huang Mingjie snorted coldly. He was the first to attack, slapping his palm toward Shui Yuanhua. Achilles' seal. Although Shui Yuanhua was arrogant, he was not stupid. After saying those arrogant words, he used the immovable Bright King seal to protect himself. In fact, he did not use any moves throughout the entire competition. As soon as he entered the arena, he would immediately use this seal and then hide in his tortoise shell. No matter how his opponent attacked, he would not come out. Only when his opponent's strength was almost exhausted did he come out to attack. Therefore, he obtained victory in all of his battles. However, he also encountered a few extremely powerful experts. It took him more than half a day to exhaust his opponent's strength and blast them out of the arena. However, he had never encountered an expert like Huang Mingjie, whose strength far exceeded his own cultivation base. Little junior brother, who do you think will win between the two of them? Wu Xinshui sat next to Murong Yu and asked as he watched Huang Mingjie, who was madly attacking Shui Yuanhua, with interest. It's hard to say. Although Shui Yuanhua's tortoiseshell is extremely powerful. However, Huang Mingjie is still a peerless genius of the Purple Thunder Hall. He's not someone the others can compare to. We still don't know what methods he has. The chances of victory are 50-50. Before Murong Yu could say anything, Lu Xiankai spoke first. Murong Yu shook his head and said with certainty, Huang Mingjie will lose without a doubt. Moreover, including Han Jingyang and the others, no one could defeat Shui Yuanhua. Lu Xiankai and Wu Xinshui immediately looked at Murong Yu with astonishment and suspicion. Their cultivation bases were higher than Murong Yu's, but they still could not see it. Why was Murong Yu so sure? Didn't you notice? Not only is Shui Yuanhua's tortoise shell strong in defense, it can also reflect power. Most importantly, his tortoise shell can also absorb a certain amount of power from attacks to replenish his own body. In other words, Shui Yuanhua does not need to exhaust his own strength to kill his opponent. Because of this, he is not afraid of fighting a battle of attrition. And his opponents, which one of them is not a peerless genius? They have their own pride. Once they are in the arena, even if Shui Yuanhua does not attack, they will definitely attack. Because of their pride, because their dignity does not allow them to not attack, they can only confront each other. And once they attack, their strength will be exhausted, while Shui Yuanhua will not suffer any losses. Hearing Murong use analysis, Lu Xiankai and Wu Xinshui immediately paid attention to Shui Yuanhua. Not long after, they looked at Murong Yu with astonishment. As expected, little junior brother, how did you notice? As a primal chaos ancestor sage, Lu Xiankai did not notice that Shui Yuanhua's tortoise shell could absorb power. In fact, Lu Xiankai was not the only one who did not notice. Many primal chaos ancestor sages did not notice. How did Murong Yu notice? Perhaps it was because he also cultivated the 9 syllables of truth. This Acalanthus seal is really too powerful. It is basically in an invincible position, unless the opponent is too much stronger than the user and smashes it with a palm. Otherwise, it is difficult to defeat. I must seize this Acalanthus seal. Looking at Shui Yuanhua, who was sneering in the square, Murong Yu's eyes flashed, but he had already made up his mind. And Shui Yuanhua, who was in the middle of the battle, seemed to feel Murong Yu's gaze. His face was full of contempt and provocation. This is so infuriating. Huang Mingjie, who was crazily attacking Shui Yuanhua, could not help but fly into a rage when he saw Shui Yuanhua diverting his attention to provoke others. Because Shui Yuanhua's situation was simply disrespectful to him, an expert. However, no matter how furious he was, he could not break Shui Yuanhua's tortoise shell in a short period of time. But the more this was the case, the angrier he was, and the fiercer his attacks became. Naturally, his strength was also consumed faster and faster. Chapter 1482. The Purple Thunder Hall of the 10 Great Sacred Lands is only SOSO. If the Purple Thunder Hall is filled with geniuses like you, then they would not be qualified to be one of the 10 Great Sacred Lands. Huang Mingjie, you really are a piece of trash. Is this all you have? You really make me despise you. In the midst of the battle, Shui Yuanhua constantly mocked Huang Mingjie. Not only did he mock Huang Mingjie, he also mocked the Purple Thunder Hall. Huang Mingjie had been fighting for a long time without being able to win, and his heart was already filled with anger. Now that he heard Shui Yuanhua's shameless mocking, the anger in his heart was completely ignited. In reality, it was not only Huang Mingjie who was angry. The other disciples and even the elders of the Purple Thunder Hall were also secretly angry. Because Shui Yuanhua really did not have a filter on his mouth, and his mouth was too smelly. On the other hand, the disciples of the other powers were looking over with smiles on their faces. Especially the disciples outside of the 10 Great Sacred Lands, because no matter what the result was, it had nothing to do with them. They were only here to watch the show. Purple Thunder, Great Sacred Art. The furious Huang Mingjie suddenly roared and used his strongest martial art, the Purple Thunder Hall's secret art, the Purple Thunder Great Sacred Art. Rumble! Before Huang Mingjie's voice fell, the sky above the plaza was suddenly enveloped by endless purple lightning that appeared out of nowhere. Lightning flashed and thunder roared. At the same time, purple lightning that contained a terrifying pressure continuously erupted from Huang Mingjie's body, and incomparably terrifying covered his entire body. Looking from afar, Huang Mingjie was like a ball of purple lightning, and his figure could not be seen clearly. An incomparably terrifying pressure descended from the sky, instantly suppressing everyone. At this moment, fear appeared in the hearts of the people near the square, some big and some small. Lightning, no matter if it was ordinary lightning or tribulation lightning, was the power that saints feared the most. Because lightning always represented the might of heaven and earth. This is the Purple Thunderhall's secret art. Looking at the endless purple lightning that Huang Mingzhi summoned, Murong Yu's face revealed a curious expression. The might of the purple lightning was indeed powerful, but to Murong Yu, it was not much of a threat. It was not even as powerful as the lightning in the depths of the lightning small world in Wenjun's secret territory. Of course, this could also be because Huang Mingzhi had not cultivated this technique to the great accomplishment stage, or because his strength was not enough, so he was unable to unleash its powerful might. After all, this was the ultimate technique of the Purple Thunder Hall. Shui Yuanhua died. Huang Mingzhi roared again, directing a torrent of purple lightning to shatter the void and strike at Shui Yuanhua. The sneer on Shui Yuanhua's face finally disappeared. However, it was just a sneer. He didn't panic. However, secretly, he had already circulated his strength to the limit and pushed the power of the immovable bright king seal to the limit. Rumble. In the blink of an eye, the purple thunderbolt had already struck Shui Yuanhua's tortoise shell. The purple lightning instantly flooded the void around Shui Yuanhua. For a moment, Shui Yuanhua's figure could not be seen. This Shui Yuanhua is finished, right? Even a high-level holy king would not be able to withstand this attack, right? Outside the arena, a few peak stage Saint Kings looked at the square before them in shock. A hint of fear actually flashed across their eyes. If it were them, they also did not have the confidence to block Huang Mingzhi's attack. One had to know that Huang Mingzhi was only a Saint King. This is a peerless genius, strength that exceeds one's cultivation level by an entire major realm is really terrifying. While everyone was guessing whether Shui Yuanhua had already been killed by Huang Mingzhi also stood where he was, looking at Shui Yuanhua with an indifferent expression and a pale face. The Purple Thunder Grand Saint technique was not something that he could use at this cultivation level. He could only barely use it. However, he firmly believed that even a peak stage Saint King would not be able to withstand this attack. Although Shui Yuanhua's tortoise shell was strong, it would definitely not be able to withstand it. The purple lightning slowly dissipated. Huang Mingzhi's expression suddenly changed. Right in his line of sight, a tortoise shell appeared. Then, Shui Yuanhua's arrogant voice sounded from afar. This is the ultimate technique of the Purple Thunder Hall. It has really broadened my horizons. Impossible! Huang Mingzhi roared angrily, and once again gathered his strength, controlling endless purple lightning to strike Shui Yuanhua. He actually didn't die. Shui Yuanhua's tortoise shell is so powerful. Seeing this scene, everyone couldn't help but be shocked. On the heaven-suppressing sect side, a brilliant smile appeared on their faces. They all knew that if there were no accidents, Huang Mingzhi would definitely lose. And Shui Yuanhua was the first person to enter the top 5. This was the first time in countless years that a disciple not from the 10 great sacred lands had entered the top 5. The significance of this to the heaven-suppressing sect was self-evident. Sure enough, not long after, Huang Mingzhi's strength was quickly consumed. In reality, before he used the Purple Thunder Grand Saint technique, he had already used up a bit of his strength. And after using the Purple Thunder Grand Saint technique, his strength was rapidly consumed, and he was left with less than 30% of his original strength. Then, after another round of storm-like attacks, his strength was almost exhausted. And at this time, Shui Yuanhua attacked. Without any suspense, Huang Mingzhi was sent flying by Shui Yuanhua with an unwilling heart. Failure. Ha ha ha. The disciples of the 10 great sacred lands are only SOSO. Today's champion will be mine. I will sweep through all the disciples of the 10 great sacred lands. Remember, I am the heaven-suppressing sect's peerless genius, Shui Yuanhua. After defeating Huang Mingzhi, Shui Yuanhua stood on the spot and laughed loudly. This bastard is too arrogant, too arrogant. Does he really think he's the champion? And he said he would sweep through all the disciples of the 10 great sacred lands. I really want to slap him to death. Looking at the arrogant Shui Yuanhua, most of the people in the square were unhappy. They wanted nothing more than to suppress this guy. However, those who were stronger disdained to suppress him, and those who wanted to teach Shui Yuanhua a lesson knew that they couldn't suppress him. After roaring to the sky, Shui Yuanhua slowly stood up, and when he stood up, he didn't forget to look at Mu Rongyu with killing intent. Junior brother, do you have a grudge with this guy? Wu Xinshui frowned when he felt Shui Yuanhua's first place. Mu Rongyu shook his head. The higher you climb, the more painful it is to fall. The more arrogant he is, the more uncomfortable he'll feel when I defeat him later. Mu Rongyu did not take Shui Yuanhua seriously at all. Perhaps he was the only one who did not take Shui Yuanhua seriously among the remaining few people. The others had a solemn expression on their faces. After Shui Yuanhua and Huang Mingzhi's battle, it was the battle between Yang Kangping from the Rising Sky sect and Feng Xian from the Cloud-Piercing Island. Both of them were not as arrogant as Shui Yuanhua, and they did not have Shui Yuanhua's terrifying turtle shell. For this reason, it was a fierce battle. All kinds of battle skills, secret techniques, saint weapons, and Dharma treasures were thrown out one after another. Holy light shone resplendently as the terrifying power continued to spread out in all directions like a tidal wave. Wherever it passed, the void would shatter into pieces. Fortunately, the square was sealed by the true martial temple's peerless powerhouse, so the energy could not spread out. Otherwise, it would cause countless deaths and injuries. Even so, many saints were still scared out of their wits. They kept retreating far away from the square. This was a real battle. The spectators were dazzled and excited. All kinds of techniques were thrown out as they attacked in a frenzy. Both of them were evenly matched, but in the end, Feng Xian from the Cloud-Piercing Island came out on top. He defeated Yang Kangping from the Rising Sky sect with a slight advantage and was the second to enter the top 5. The third battle was between Mu Rongyu and Shi Kangsheng from the Heavenly King Palace. Shi Kangsheng was a taciturn and ordinary-looking young man. He cupped his fists slightly at Mu Rongyu and shouted, "Heavenly King Great Saint Technique." The Heavenly King Great Saint Technique was the Heavenly King Palace's secret technique. Perhaps he knew Mu Rongyu was a formidable opponent, so Shi Kangsheng immediately used his secret technique in an attempt to suppress Mu Rongyu in one fell swoop. Boom! A Heavenly King covered in golden armor stepped out of the void and landed on top of Shi Kangsheng's head. In the blink of an eye, he sent a palm strike towards Mu Rongyu. When Mu Rongyu saw the golden armor Heavenly King, he could not help but exclaim in surprise. Huh! He realized the golden armor Heavenly King looked very familiar. Celestial God's Descent. Mu Rongyu shouted in his heart and used the technique he had obtained in the celestial world, Celestial God's Descent. Boom! A golden armor Heavenly King identical to the one Shi Kangsheng summoned appeared above Mu Rongyu's head. At this moment, everyone was dumbfounded, especially Shi Kangsheng and the Heavenly King Palace's disciples and elders. Heavenly King Great Saint Technique. How does Mu Rongyu know the Heavenly King Great Saint Technique? Shi Kangsheng was so stunned that he forgot to continue attacking. The people from the Heavenly King Palace outside the square also began to attack as they looked at the golden armor Heavenly King above Mu Rongyu's head in horror. As the Heavenly King Palace's secret technique, the Heavenly King Great Saint Technique was not easily passed down. There were only a few people in the entire sect who were qualified to cultivate this technique. Every one of them was a peerless genius like Shi Kangsheng. Moreover, they had to be loyal to the Heavenly King Palace. Otherwise, it was impossible to pass down this technique. Mu Rongyu was a disciple of the Infernal Tao. So how did he know the Heavenly King Palace's technique? Did the Infernal Tao have this technique? If so, how did the Infernal Tao get it? What was going on with all of this? For a moment, the Heavenly King Palace's people could not wrap their heads around it. The other sects looked at Mu Rongyu in shock. Could it be that the Heavenly King Palace and the infernal Tao have been secretly colluding? They even gave out their secret technique? That was what they thought. What no one knew was that the truth was not what they thought. Muron, you had already cultivated this technique in the celestial world. Chapter 1483. Whether it was the appearance of the golden armor Heavenly King or the aura they emitted, the Heavenly King summoned by Muron Yu and Shang were the same. In fact, the strength of the aura emitted by the two Heavenly Kings was about the same. Of course, there was still a difference. Although the Heavenly King summoned by Muron Yu was somewhat lifelike, his face was a little blurry and could not be seen clearly. However, the face of the Heavenly King summoned by Shang was very clear, as if it was Shang. It was exactly the same, without any difference. And in terms of aura, the Heavenly King summoned by Muron Yu was also weaker. This was the reason for the completeness of the cultivation technique. Obviously, the God's Descent that Muron Yu cultivated was only a simplified version of the Heavenly King Great Sage Art. It wasn't even a simplified version. It was only the tip of the iceberg of the Heavenly King Great Sage Art. It was only a small part of the complete cultivation technique. However, even if it was an incomplete cultivation technique under Muron Yu's cultivation, it still had astonishing power. At least for now, the two of them were evenly matched. Even if Muron Yu's golden armor Heavenly King was at a disadvantage, it was still unknown who was stronger and who was weaker. Kill. After a moment of shock, Shang came to his senses. With a loud roar, the golden armor Heavenly King's body shook violently, and he once again punched towards Muron Yu. Before the fist had even landed, a circle of inexplicable energy waves had already torn through the void, charging towards Muron Yu, and even sweeping in all directions. At this moment, Muron Yu felt that his mind was a little absent-minded, but was only a little absent-minded. However, unlike some of the saints outside the square, at this moment, their minds had all fallen into a daze. This was the attack of the mind. In fact, the Heavenly King Hall's ultimate art did not have any offensive power. However, in terms of strength and terror, it surpassed the true martial temple's true martial scripture and the Heavenly Dipper sect's Heavenly Dipper great technique. This was because the other ultimate arts all possessed unparalleled battle prowess. However, the Heavenly King Great Sage Art suppressed the mind. No matter how powerful your absolute art was, as long as you lost your mind in battle, you would end up dead. Therefore, although the Heavenly King Palace was not ranked high among the 10 great saint lands, the people from the other saint lands were more or less wary of the experts from the Heavenly King Palace. They were worried about this Heavenly King Great Sage technique. Seeing Shang's attack, Muron Yu did not show any signs of weakness. He shook his Heavenly King and charged forward. In a split second, the power of the two Heavenly Kings clashed fiercely in the void. A series of silent explosions erupted. Although there wasn't the dazzling effect caused by the collision of pure strength. However, it was extremely dangerous, because if one was not careful, one's mind would be shattered. Humph! Humph! Muron Yu and Shang both snorted coldly. Shang even retreated a few steps, his face instantly turning pale. Although Muron Yu snorted coldly, he did not retreat. His face was not red, and he was not out of breath. It was obvious that in this battle of the mind, Muron Yu did not suffer any injuries. Not only was Shang at a disadvantage, he was also injured. I admit defeat. Just as Muron Yu was looking at Shang with a smile on his face, Shang abruptly spoke up. Then, he took a step forward and disappeared from the square. He returned to the Heavenly King Palace and sat down cross-legged on the ground. Seeing this result, the people outside the square naturally had their jaws dropped. They had clearly only attacked once, and although Shang was at a disadvantage, he hadn't failed yet. Had he? Could be that these two guys were gay? Everyone was guessing. Although everyone was suspicious, the result was still the same. Muron Yu entered the top 5. Junior brother, what's going on? Why did that Shi Kongsheng suddenly admit defeat? Could it be that you guys are gay? Gay? When Murong Yu returned, he saw Lu Xiankai and the other two looking at him strangely. Murong Yu staggered and almost fell to the ground. Then, he said in a speechless manner, I like women the most. Moreover, it's only limited to those few women of mine. Then why did Shi Kongsheng suddenly admit defeat? If it wasn't because you guys are gay. Wu Xinshui was still looking at Murong Yu strangely. Murong Yu was helpless and could only explain. It turned out that although the two of them had only exchanged a single blow, that single blow had gathered the most powerful mental attacks of both of them. Mind power and mind power were directly related to the soul. The stronger the soul, the more soul power, the stronger the mind power and mind power. Although Shi Kongsheng's soul was strong, he was not a soul saint after all. He could not be compared to Murong Yu's 3-star soul. Therefore, under the same level of mind attack, Shi Kongsheng's mind was injured. Although it was not enough to threaten his life, that was only the first attack. There would be a second attack, a third attack, and even more attacks. His mind could not withstand any more attacks. On the other hand, Murong Yu was completely fine. If this went on, Shi Kongsheng would still lose. Moreover, it would also cause great damage to his mind. It would be better to just admit defeat now. It would just be a little embarrassing. However, which was more important, face or life? It was obviously his life. Therefore, Shi Kongsheng admitted defeat decisively. Murong Yu was rather appreciative of this. As the saying went, a wise man submits to circumstances. After Murong Yu, it was the true martial temple's Han Zhenyang against the 9 cauldron sects Higaojia. Both of them were extremely powerful. Perhaps they were influenced by Murong Yu and Shi Kongsheng. Once they came out, they unleashed their strongest attacks. They even used their sect's ultimate techniques. It was a clash of ultimate techniques. The fight was extremely intense. In the end, the 9 cauldron sects Higaojia lost to Han Zhenyang helplessly. Although their abilities were on par, there was no second place in martial arts. There was still someone who was slightly stronger. After the winner was decided, there was one last pair of opponents left. Unparalleled Palace's Fei Yuqin and Bai Luo Palace's Mei Shanshan. Both of them were at the same level and had similar abilities. Moreover, they were both devastatingly beautiful. Therefore, before the battle began, many people in the square were already excited. Being able to watch their battle made them excited. Being able to watch the battle between two great beauties made them even more excited. And these two beauties didn't disappoint the hopes of these people. Listening to their graceful and charming bodies fighting, it was very enjoyable for the crowd to watch. However, no matter how exciting the battle was, there would always be an end. After a long while, Unparalleled Palace's Fei Yuqin defeated by Luo Palace's Mei Shanshan with her powerful abilities and won. This woman can at least enter the top 3, Murong Yu thought to himself. Including him, Turtle King Shui Yuanhua was second and Fei Yuqin was third. Even true martial temple's Han Zhengyang was no match for her. Feng Xian's abilities were below Han Zhengyang's. As for first place, it was undoubtedly Murong Yu. When Murong Yu came to participate in this martial arts competition, the first place was already his. At least, that was what he thought. Next was the competition for the top 5. With the help of true martial temple's elders and medicinal pills, everyone who had experienced the battle recovered to their peak condition. Of course, Murong Yu did not need this help at all. Therefore, he directly rejected it. This made some people dislike him, thinking that he was too arrogant and stubborn. However, some people with sharp eyes could see that Murong Yu did not use any energy at all. This discovery shocked them even more and made them even more curious about Murong Yu. Murong Yu, Fei Yuqin, Shui Yuanhua, Han Zhengyang, and Feng Xian. The champion would be born from these 5 people. Soon, their order of appearance was arranged. Fei Yuqin would fight Han Zhengyang, Murong Yu would fight Feng Xian, and Turtle King Shui Yuanhua would have a bye. Originally, they should be very happy to have a bye. After all, they did not need to fight and directly advanced. However, Shui Yuanhua cursed a few times in a very unhappy mood. He glared fiercely at Murong Yu and the other three, then left resentfully. Does this guy have masochistic tendencies? Murong Yu and the others were quite speechless. A fierce battle between a dragon and a tiger began again. Fei Yuqin against Han Zhengyang. This battle was more intense than any previous battle. It was really earth-shattering, and the sun and moon lost their light. However, just as Murong Yu had guessed before, Han Zhengyang was not weak. In the end, he was no match for Fei Yuqin. He was eliminated by her and lost the chance to compete for the championship. Then, Murong Yu went up. Murong Yu, I've been waiting for this moment for a long time. Aren't you arrogant? Today, I'll let you see the true experts of Cloud-Piercing Island. Feng Xian roared and charged towards Murong Yu. Whether it's Cloud-Piercing Island or true martial temple, no one is my match. The championship is mine, and you're no exception. Murong Yu smiled faintly and used the Heavenly King Grand Sage technique at the same time. When the golden armor Heavenly King appeared, Feng Xian lost his mind. Even if it was only 1/100th of an instant, it was enough. Go back for me. Murong Yu's voice suddenly rang in Feng Xian's ears. Then, Feng Xian suddenly felt a sharp pain in his body, and his entire body flew backwards. When he reacted, he had already returned to the Cloud-Piercing Island seats. It was obvious that he had lost. He was defeated by Murong Yu in one move. He was the one who lost the fastest and most thoroughly in the top 10. You lost. Just as Feng Xian was about to rush back and fight Murong Yu once more, Murong Yu smiled at him and said, "All right, I'll take care of you." Feng Xian was furious and filled with killing intent. However, he also knew that he had lost. Regardless of whether it was out of consideration for himself or for the Cloud-Piercing Island, Feng Xian could only glare fiercely at Murong Yu before sitting down cross-legged and closing his eyes. What the eye doesn't see, the heart doesn't grieve over. Chapter 1484. When Murong Yu returned, Wu Xinshui said with a smile, "I thought there would be a fierce battle, but I didn't expect Junior Brother to win so quickly." Murong Yu smiled. He knew his own situation. Whether it was defeating Shi Kongsheng or Feng Xian, Murong Yu had actually used tricks. These two people were both peak ancient sages and had strength that exceeded their own realm. If they fought, Murong Yu might not lose, but it would definitely take a lot of effort. However, when he faced Shi Kongsheng, because of his powerful soul, he was able to quickly defeat Shi Kongsheng in a clash of their minds. In fact, if Shi Kongsheng didn't admit defeat so quickly, he might be able to suppress Murong Yu with his powerful strength. At least, he wouldn't let Murong Yu win so easily. And against Feng Xian, Murong Yu was able to send Feng Xian flying in an instant because of the Heavenly King Grand Sage art. If it was a life and death battle, Murong Yu's attack wouldn't be able to injure Feng Xian, let alone kill him. But this was only a martial arts competition. Being sent out of the square, Feng Xian was naturally considered to have lost. Of course, in terms of strength, Murong Yu might not be as strong as these experts. But with his identity as a soul sage and the Heavenly King Grand Sage art and other battle skills, he would definitely be able to sweep these geniuses. In fact, Murong Yu had already planned to use his soul force. However, he hadn't met a strong opponent before, and only used the Heavenly King Grand Sage art to defeat his opponent. But whether Murong Yu faced Shui Yuanhua or Fei Yuqin, it was impossible for him to use the Heavenly King Grand Sage art to win, because they were already on guard against this battle skill. Murong Yu, Fei Yuqin, and Shui Yuanhua were fighting for the championship. After resting for a while, the three of them went up to draw lots. This time, Murong Yu's first time was very good. All he needed to do was to compete with the winner of the next battle. The championship is mine, whether it's the unparalleled palace or the seamless sect. Murong Yu, Fei Yuqin, just admit defeat. Otherwise, I'll make you guys lose miserably. Shui Yuanhua had just finished drawing the lots and was already talking big. Brat, although I don't know what you have on you, I can't help you. However, you're dead for sure. At the same time, Shui Yuanhua's voice sounded in Murong Yu's ears. Murong Yu smiled faintly. That's what I wanted to say to you. You're dead meat. After saying that, Murong Yu stepped into the air and quickly left the square. Immediately, Shui Yuanhua and Fei Yuqin began their battle. At the same time, the battle for the championship on the other side had also begun. Yu Yangjia of the Infernal Society and a primal chaos ancestral saint of the true martial temple. However, at this time, their battle had already been transferred to another space-time by the Almighty of the true martial temple. Both of them were extremely powerful, and the residual power they unleashed could easily destroy the formations and restrictions on the square. Therefore, to prevent accidental injuries, they could only transfer to another space-time to fight. In any case, at this level of battle, many people present could not even see their moves. The Tortoise King's defense is too strong. Experts of the same level would find it difficult to break through. Lu Xiankai shook his head helplessly as he watched the battle between the two. In fact, it was only Fei Yuqin attacking while the Tortoise King was defending. The Tortoise King's defense is very strong. It's almost perfect. It's nothing for us to worry about, but experts of the same level, even those at the peak of the Sage Ruler stage, would find it difficult to break through, Wu Xinshui said. There was no strongest defense, only absolute defense. For example, the Tortoise King's defense was close to perfect. However, due to the limitations of his own strength, he could only defend against someone 2 realms higher than him at most. At the level of an ancestral saint, his defense was not very useful. For example, Wu Xinshui could break through his defense with a casual slash. Not to mention experts at the level of a primal chaos ancestral saint. Fei Yuqin will definitely not be able to break through the Tortoise King's defense. Unless she has an ancestral artifact or a primal chaos ancestral artifact that can activate its power, Lu Xiankai continued. An ancestral artifact that could activate its power was equivalent to an ancestral saint, while a primal chaos ancestral artifact was equivalent to a primal chaos ancestral saint. With the strength of an ancestral saint, of course, she could break through the Tortoise King's defense. However, Fei Yuqin could only control a sage artifact at most. After all, she was only an ancient saint. Little junior brother, are you confident that you can break through the Tortoise King's defense? Wu Xinshui and Wu Xinshui looked at Murong Yu with a hint of worry in their eyes. If Murong Yu could not break through the Tortoise King's defense, then he would miss out on the championship. Murong Yu shook his head. He could not say for sure before coming into contact with the Tortoise King. However, although the Tortoise King's defense was strong, it was definitely not invincible. There had to be a way to break it. The battle ended very quickly. Fei Yuqin was very strong, but she was helpless against the Tortoise King. She wanted to exhaust the Tortoise King's strength, but she realized that the Tortoise King was still standing there without any energy consumption. In the end, she could only admit defeat helplessly. Ha ha ha! Murong Yu, hurry up and come out to meet your death. Shui Yuanhua refused to rest. He looked at Murong Yu from the square and laughed loudly. His laughter was full of disdain, contempt, and arrogance. Murong Yu stood up from his seat with an indifferent expression. He took a step forward and appeared in front of the Tortoise King. Murong Yu, everything on you is mine. Tortoise King Shui Yuanhua looked at Murong Yu with a ferocious expression. The closer he got to Murong Yu, the more his cultivation technique pulsed. It was as if it was going to burst out of his body. If I can refine the things on him, my defense will become stronger. I might be able to withstand the attack of an expert who is 3 realms higher than me. Shui Yuanhua's eyes flashed with a cold light, but he was thinking in his heart. Of course, he couldn't kill Murong Yu here. Unless he could kill Murong Yu in one blow, he wouldn't be able to kill Murong Yu, let alone take the things on Murong Yu's body. The other disciples of the Infernal Society and the elders of the true martial temple wouldn't allow him to do so. First, I'll defeat him here, then wait for him to leave the true martial temple before killing him. Shui Yuanhua's heart was filled with killing intent. He didn't know that Murong Yu was also thinking of the same thing. Your tortoise shell is indeed strong, but it's just a joke in front of me. Murong suppressed the restless, 9 words mantra in his body and said indifferently, Achilles seal. Shui Yuanhua roared and assumed a defensive posture. 1,000 army elephant fist. Murong roared at the same time and punched out. Boom! Murong fist fiercely bombarded the Tortoise King's defensive barrier. Suddenly, the barrier flickered with holy light and soared into the sky. At the same time, Murong felt that the power he blasted out was like a flood that was released from a dam, quickly pouring out in torrents. Murong's keen senses told him that a portion of the power he'd sent out had been absorbed by the defensive barrier, while a portion of it had been deflected. The rest of it had circulated around the defensive barrier before returning to him at lightning speed. Recoil. When Murong truly came into contact with the Tortoise King, he realized just how strong the barrier was. It could be said that the Tortoise King didn't even need to use his own power to exhaust his opponent to death. Moreover, he was using his opponent's power to exhaust his opponent to death. However, the stronger the Tortoise King's barrier was, the happier Murong was. Immediately, the power in Murong's body surged, and he punched out again. Boom! After a loud explosion, the Tortoise King Shui Yuanhua stood in place without moving, but Murong couldn't help but take a step back. Even Murong isn't the Tortoise King's opponent. It seems that the Tortoise King will be the champion this time. It's really shameful. The champion is actually a disciple outside the 10 Holy Lands. The 10 Holy Lands really lost a lot of face this time. Many people from the 10 Holy Lands felt that they had lost face and were somewhat unhappy. But the people outside the 10 Holy Lands cheered, although they weren't from the heaven-suppressing sect, and some forces were even at odds with them. In this competition, the Tortoise King represented not only the heaven-suppressing sect, but also all the forces outside the 10 Holy Lands. Since ancient times, it was impossible for them to suppress the people from the 10 Holy Lands. But now, if the Tortoise King won the championship, it would definitely be a landmark event. It was worth celebrating. Cheers! With my strength, even if I reach the peak of the profound sage realm, I'm afraid that I won't be able to break the Tortoise King's barrier. Moreover, although I have more than 70 ancestral artifacts now, I might not be able to reach the peak of the profound sage realm after refining them all. Thoughts flashed through Murong's mind like lightning. The Heavenly King Great Sage technique might be able to make him lose his mind, but it won't be able to break his barrier. Do I really have to use a soul attack? Although Murong had long been prepared to use a soul attack, he still didn't want to expose all his cards so quickly. After all, he was already close to being the tallest tree in the forest. He was a genius in alchemy and refining. His strength exceeded his own by 2 realms. Moreover, he was a soul sage. So many heaven-defying abilities were on Murong's body. At that time, how many people would covet him? He was afraid that those old monsters of the true martial temple wouldn't be able to resist taking him down, even if they had to fall out with the unbroken path. There must be some other way. Murong thought. Suddenly, a light flashed in his mind. The flame of primal chaos was known to burn everything. The 9 secret words might be very powerful, but could it be above the primal chaos that evolved everything? That was impossible. The 9 secret words were also created by powerhouses. As for powerhouses, their lives were derived from the primal chaos. The primal chaos was the mother of all things. The primal chaos could evolve everything, but could also annihilate everything. Boom! In an instant, the black flame of primal chaos erupted from Murong's body, instantly submerging Murong. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.